Chapter 1198. There were still some who did not understand, but even more were horrified. Everyone knew that Lu Yin was 7th Bro, and 7th Bro had jumped from a 1-star Perceptive Intermediate Lockbreaker to a 5-star Perceptive Intermediate Lockbreaker, which had caused a huge commotion in the Lockbreaker Society. Now there was another assessment, and it was obvious that this was the Boundless Advanced Lockbreaker assessment. Lu Yin was taking the test to become a Boundless Advanced Lockbreaker. Everyone gasped. Can't be right? So fast. Casanova pursed his lips. What a freak. Lu Ji was stunned, and her desire to challenge Lu Yin vanished. Even though Lu Yin had yet to successfully unlock a Boundless Advanced Source Box, for some reason, everyone believed that he would succeed. The other two youths stared at the screen. They were also part of the Lockbreaker Society's 5 heroes. One was called Miwen, and he was a 3-star Perceptive Intermediate Lockbreaker. The other was called Qingjiu, and he was the leader of the 5 heroes. He had just become a 5-star Perceptive Intermediate Lockbreaker the day before, and even Wu Dan did not know about this. But even if she did, she would not have cared. Just as he had said, a difference of one word could make the difference between heaven and earth. Lu Yin is truly a legend. Miwen smiled and then looked at Qingjiu. If he joins the Innerverse Lockbreaker Society, then he can replace you. Qingjiu silently leaned against the wall and did not reply. At this moment the door to a Lockbreaker room opened and someone walked out. If Lu Yin was here, he would have been shocked, as the person who walked out was an old acquaintance. Astral FX's former leader, Dao Bo. Everyone watched as Dao Bo walked out. Qingjiu said, "Congratulations on becoming a 1-star Perceptive Intermediate Lockbreaker. From now on you are one of the 5 heroes. No, one of the 4 heroes." The Innerverse Lockbreaker Society had once had the 5 heroes, but unfortunately, 2 of them had died during the 6th Mainland's invasion. Otherwise, even if Dao Bo became a Perceptive Intermediate Lockbreaker, he would not have been able to replace them. Adding another member to the 5 heroes would have been a joyous occasion, but everyone's eyes were glued to the screen. Once Lu Yin became a Boundless Advanced Lockbreaker, that would be a huge matter. Lu Yin represented the Outerverse, and his success meant that the Outerverse Lockbreaker Society had surpassed the Innerverse Lockbreaker Society. The Newverse Lockbreaker Society had already surpassed the Outerverse Lockbreaker Society, and the Innerverse Lockbreaker Society had now become the weakest. Dao Bo nodded at Lightfeather, and he followed everyone's gaze to the screen. When he saw Lu Yin, he was shocked. "You have a good junior." Miwen smiled as he looked at Dao Bo. Then he continued playing his game. Everyone stared at Lu Yin's lock-breaking image in silence. In the Lockbreaker world, Lu Yin had already spent an entire day unlocking source boxes. With his current speed, it would not take him long to unlock even a Perceptive Intermediate source box. However, when it came to a Boundless Advanced source box, one day was clearly not enough. When Lu Yin was able to unlock normally, everyone knew that he had succeeded. No matter how long it took, he would succeed. No one considered whether he would give up due to lack of energy. Another 2 days passed, and in the Lockbreaker world quite a few people had already stopped watching. They had already seen the results, but after hearing the news, many people wanted to watch even more. This was because they wanted to know what they would gain from successfully unlocking the stone bridge. There were many different types of source boxes in the universe, and none of them were the same. There were source boxes of all shapes and sizes, but source boxes that were shaped like stone bridges were very rare. Many people had attempted to lockbreak and had heard many ancient messages, which made them even more curious about stone bridges. Lu Yin's expression was solemn as he stared at the stone bridge. He had already unlocked more than half of the source box and was about to succeed. He was also looking forward to seeing what he would gain from it. With a soft sound, the sealed energy outside the stone bridge disintegrated. Everyone stared intently at the bridge, wondering what would appear. The stone bridge was very ancient, and for it to be sealed as a source box meant that it had an extraordinary significance. Any successful lockbreaking of a Boundless Advanced source box would attract a lot of attention, and at this moment many lockbreakers habitually ended the video so that no one could watch. Lu Yin was inexperienced, so he did not end the video. Fortunately, Gui Juanheng had taken action and ended the video the moment Lu Yin succeeded. Otherwise, everyone would have known what Lu Yin had unlocked. When the video ended, many people in the Lockbreaker world were shocked. Lu Yin had succeeded, and he could now become a Boundless Advanced Lockbreaker. Boundless Advanced and Perceptive Intermediate. Different levels naturally meant different statuses. Any boundless advanced lockbreaker had privileges that far exceeded those of ordinary lockbreakers. If any boundless advanced lockbreaker died, they would be investigated by the Lockbreaker Society. The Lockbreaker Society could use the entire Hall of Honor to conduct an investigation, which was equivalent to having more than 10 honor points. In the Innerverse Lockbreaker Society, everyone watched the video end in silence. Dao Bo sighed. He could still remember when Lu Yin had been studying at the Astral Combat Academy and had clashed with the Blaze Realm. Dao Bo had even helped Lu Yin back then. At that time Lu Yin had multiple clones and now his status had become unreachable. Among those of the same generation who could do what Dao Bo had done. In the Neoverse, atop Realm Mountains, superior sage Wudi sighed. What a pity. If he had joined Everlasting Island, Master would have definitely nurtured him with all his might. None of us can inherit Master's legacy, but this kid can. What a pity. Elder Chan replied, it's fine. His achievements are also the achievements of the human domain and the fifth mainland. Although Lu Yin had just become a boundless advanced lockbreaker, some people were not looking at the current Lu Yin. Instead, they were looking at the future where they were witnessing the birth of a resplendent powerhouse. A person's height determined their horizons. Wu Dan was also a boundless advanced lockbreaker, but he only looked at Lu Yin's lockbreaking abilities. He did not have a clear understanding of Lu Yin's power level, and he was filled with confidence in himself. Yu Hua, Mavis and the others had only looked at Lu Yin's power level, not his lockbreaking abilities. As for Mu En, he had seen Lu Yin's boldness and methods to unify the Outerverse. Everyone was in a different position, so they naturally saw different things. No one would have thought that they were only looking at one side of Lu Yin. Only someone like Elder Chan, who stood at the peak of the universe and knew about the past and present, could see through Lu Yin. Looking at it from another perspective, a youth like Elder Chan needed to see through him. What kind of genius was that? In the Lockbreaker world, Lu Yin stared blankly at the stone bridge where he had successfully unlocked it. There was only a pile of sand and nothing else. He pursed his lips. He had successfully unlocked the stone bridge, but it had also disappeared. This was the pain of being a lockbreaker. They had paid a huge price to succeed, but in the end they had gained nothing. Shao Qi sighed. There's nothing. Bad luck. Shao Shi shook his head. Gui Juanheng looked at the sand on the ground and her eyes flashed. There's something there. Just as she spoke, Lu Yin also saw that there was something hidden within the ordinary sand. Was that Fateson? Lu Yin was shocked and blew away the sand. There were 16 grains of Fateson on the ground. Fateson was very precious, and Lu Yin had met many people in the Innerverse and Outerverse, but there were very few who had Fateson. Back then he had even stolen Hong Ying's Fates and infused with it. Now he had actually obtained 16 grains of Fateson. Lu Yin was delighted, as this was good stuff. Gui Juanheng nodded and sighed. It's rare to be able to obtain something from lock-breaking. Lu Yin put away the grains of Fateson. Thank you, Senior, for granting me this source box. Gui Juanheng smiled. There's no need to thank me. After you pass the test, the society will compensate me with a boundless advanced source box. I didn't lose out, and I even got to personally witness the birth of a boundless advanced lockbreaker. Huh. Lu Yin smiled, and then he suddenly thought of something. He raised his hand and 2 grains of Fateson appeared. He handed them to Shao Qi and Shao Shi. For you. The 2 mushroom-headed youths were stunned, and they looked at each other before looking at Lu Yin in confusion. Lu Yin said, Thank you for introducing me to this senior. This is my thanks. Giving something to Gui Juanheng was a slap in the face. She was a senior, and Lu Yin did not have the qualifications to do so, so he could only give it to these 2 youths. Shao Qi was Gui Juanheng's disciple, so giving it to him was also considered giving it to Gui Juanheng. Gui Juanheng beamed as she watched. The 2 mushroom-headed youths cowered. Lu Yin smiled. Take it. It's fine. The 2 youths accepted the source boxes. Lu Yin had a use for the Fateson. He had been able to fuse with Hong Ying's Fates, and so he should be able to fuse with these grains as well. He definitely needed to fuse with the Fateson in his heart to block that black and white fog. If he used the Fateson to block it, others would not be able to see it. Of course, it would be a different story for the head inquisitors. You can wait here for a while. The assessment will be over soon, and once you pass, you will be able to have your own planet in the Lockbreaker realm as your lockbreaking ground. You will also be able to enjoy all the benefits of the Lockbreaker Society, including lock-breaking tools, techniques, and even exchanging source boxes of equivalent value for source boxes in the Ancient Spirit Sea. The Ancient Spirit Sea was a nearby ocean that had been nurtured by 6 enormous source box arrays. Lu Yin curiously asked, "Senior, what are the source box arrays in the Lockbreaker realm called?" Gui Juanheng casually answered, 6 ancient spirit arrays. Lu Yin was shocked. Xiaoshi looked at Lu Yin in shock. "You've heard of them?" Lu Yin shook his head. "Nope, but the name sounds amazing." At that moment Gui Juanheng's gadget beeped. She glanced at it and then said to Lu Yin's group, "I'm going out for a bit. Feel free to do as you wish." She then left. Xiaoqi arrived at the stone bridge where Lu Yin had successfully unlocked the source box and lamented. A boundless advanced source box was able to unlock Fateson. "What a pity." Xiaoshi replied, "It's all right. Fateson is very precious and there aren't many people in the innerverse or outerverse who have it. Even in my neoverse there aren't many who can obtain it. It's just a pity that we can't gather all of it. Otherwise we would be able to affect fate." Lu Yin raised his brows, but Xiaoshi's words interrupted his thoughts. "What do you mean by gathering all of it?" Xiaoshi replied, "Fateson." "What do you mean by gathering all of it? Is it scattered?" Lu Yin asked. Xiaoshi nodded and then pushed his glasses up. He flipped open the book and looked through it carefully. "Found it." He stared at the book and solemnly said, "Fateson is created by fate. Once all of it is gathered, it can affect one's own fate and divine the past and future. It can even see through the long rivers of the world. It's a very mysterious thing." Lu Yin also stared at the book but he did not say anything. Chapter 1199. Xiaoqi was shocked. "Draw upon fate? What do you mean?" Xiaoshi replied, "It's fate. That powerhouse that couldn't be any more ancient should be from the same generation as the Grim Reaper." Xiaoqi gasped. "There's more than just the Grim Reaper in that generation?" Xiaoshi seriously replied, "There are other ancient powerhouses as well, but for some reason they're all gone." Lu Yin didn't want to continue this conversation. The story was pretty good. The Grim Reaper and fate sounded more and more mysterious, and it wasn't as convincing as the Starsabil sect's story. However, the name Fateson was rather mystical. Ding. Lu Yin's gadget beeped. He looked over and saw that 7th Bro's name had changed from a 5-star perceptive intermediate to a 1-star boundless advanced. He had succeeded. At the same time he received a constant stream of congratulatory messages from various parties. He had received these messages when he had reached the perceptive intermediate level, or rather he had received more each time he had advanced, but he had never paid attention to them. However, there was one piece of news that made him happy. He had a planet in the Lockbreaker realm. Any Lockbreaker who had reached the boundless advanced level could obtain a planet upon arriving at the Neoverse Lockbreaker realm. Saul could obtain one as well, but he had never been to the Neoverse before, so he naturally didn't have one. The planet that Lu Yin had obtained was in a very good location, right next to Gui Junheng's planet and very close to the Ancient Spirit Sea. Lu Yin brought Xiaoshi and Xiaoqi to the planet. "So it's this planet," Xiaoqi said. Xiaoshi was puzzled. "You know about it?" Xiaoqi nodded. "This planet originally belonged to a 3 stars boundless advanced lockbreaker. I've seen him a few times and he's always outside. However, after the 6th mainland's invasion he never returned. The Lockbreaker Society has added him to their death list." Lu Yin was conflicted. Too many people had died during the 6th mainland's invasion, and he hadn't seen many of them. However, there were many who had died throughout the human domain. The 6th mainland owed the 5th mainland too much blood. Perhaps this was also why they had moved to the outerverse. Only the outerverse had fewer blood debts as the innerverse could not accommodate them. On the planet, all of the Lockbreaker's belongings had long since been taken away. Lu Yin was the only person who lived on the planet along with a few mechanical servants. There were very few ordinary people in the Lockbreaker world and those who came were all Lockbreakers. Many powerful Lockbreaker's servants were actually their students. "Lu, big brother Lu, are you going to recruit students?" Xiaoqi asked, looking very expectant. Xiaoshi's eyes lit up as she looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin laughed. "So what if I do? We can help you find one." Xiaoqi was eager to give it a try. Exams were very fun. Lu Yin shook his head. "There's no need. I'll be heading back to the Outerverse soon and I don't come here often. Xiaoqi was disappointed. You guys have fun. I'm going into seclusion to unlock the source boxes that I obtained before, Lu Yin said. Xiaoqi looked at Lu Yin. What kind of source box? Do you have any humanoid ones? Lu Yin shook his head, but then he was surprised. There's even a humanoid source box? Xiaoqi and Xiaoshi looked at each other and nodded. I've never seen such a source box before. What kind of source box is this? Lu Yin was curious. Xiaoqi's expression was serious. He's human, but he might not be a good person. Lu Yin did not understand. Xiaoshi tugged at Xiaoqi and whispered into his ear. Xiaoqi nodded from time to time and then looked at Lu Yin. Big brother Lu, you're now a boundless advanced lock breaker. If you meet someone who wants you to unlock a source box that looks like a living creature, it's best not to touch it. Like a human or some other living creature? Lu Yin asked. Xiaoqi nodded. Give me a reason, Lu Yin said. Xiaoqi shook his head. You won't believe me even if I tell you now. In any case, you have to be vigilant. I've told many people, but no one listens to me. However, no one has ever encountered a humanoid source box before. Lu Yin's eyes flashed and he pointed at Xiaoshi's book. Is it related to what's recorded in the book? Xiaoshi was shocked. How did you know? Lu Yin could not be bothered with them, and he went in after finding his seclusion area, leaving the two mushroom-headed individuals to look at each other. Do you think he'll believe you? Probably not. No one believes us, not even the president. It's fine. That kind of thing probably won't happen, and it's not likely to happen. The seclusion area was very large, and many of the planets in the Lockbreaker realm were covered by spiritual silk, which meant that spiritual silk was not worth much here. Lu Yin did not have any source boxes to unlock, so what he needed to do was roll his die and comprehend true insight. He had already handed over a page of true insight, but he still had 5 pages left. With 5 pages of true insight, he wondered how many source box arrays he would be able to comprehend, and he was looking forward to it. Right, Guyu's notes also seemed to contain some source box arrays, but no matter how he looked at them, they seemed incomplete. Lu Yin raised his hand and his die appeared. He did not place his cosmic ring to the side, as it had been a long time since he had rolled enhance. It would not be bad if he could roll enhance this time. As he thought about it, he tapped the die and it slowly came to a stop. Lu Yin was speechless, as it really was enhance. The scene in front of him changed and he appeared in a strange place. There were balls of light everywhere, and Lu Yin did not know whose body he would fuse with, as he had no control over it. There were 7.21 million star essence in his cosmic ring, and he estimated that he would be able to teleport to a very distant place. Lu Yin looked around and found a very bright ball of light. He flew towards it and fused with it. The scene in front of him changed again and Lu Yin blinked. When he could clearly see what was in front of him, he was stunned. What was he seeing? What the hell was this? He was in the boundless heavens and there was dirt floating all around him. There were many planets in the distance. Lu Yin was also in outer space, and in front of him was a strange beast that was devouring a planet. Lu Yin rubbed his eyes and his pupils shrank. There was no mistaking it. It was indeed devouring a planet. A giant beast was devouring a planet. What the hell? Many memories quickly flooded into his mind, and Lu Yin closed his eyes to think for a moment. When he opened them again, he was extremely shocked. This planet-devouring beast was called the Star Devourer, and it was a member of the Astral Beast Domain's Skyminder list. This place was the Astral Beast Domain. Lu Yin had never thought that he would end up in the Astral Beast Domain and fuse with one of the Star Devourer's protectors. This protector had a power level of over 300,000, which was very attractive to Lu Yin. By coincidence, he had actually seen the Star Devourer devouring a planet. At that moment, another memory flooded into his mind and Lu Yin's head swelled. Gradually he began to understand. The 6th mainland had invaded the 5th mainland, and besides invading the human domain, they had also invaded the Astral Beast Domain. The Astral Beast Domain had suffered heavy losses, and nearly half of the members of the Skyminder list, who had once been considered as comparable to the 10 arbiters, had died. It was only after news of the Supreme Tournament had spread that new members had joined the Skyminder list. The Star Devourer was one of them. It was a mysterious astral beast that was like the celestial hoe in that it was rarely born. It ate planets, and the more planets it ate, the stronger it became. The Star Devourer could digest planets and convert them into energy. If the Mavis family was the representative of the human domain, then the Star Devourer was the representative of the Astral Beast domain. Aside from the Star Devourer, the Celestial Beast Empire's sleeping crown prince, Zhou Xian, and a bug called the 100 Lineages had also joined the Skyminder list. The Skyminder list recorded the strongest races in the Astral Beast domain, and the first was the Celestial Beast bloodline. The Celestial Beast bloodline was the founder of the Celestial Beast Empire. Their power was formless and they fed on spiritual force. In second place was the Death Bug bloodline. It was rumored that the Death Bug was born from an ancient progenitor and was the ancestor of all bugs. Although it was ranked second, it had not appeared for hundreds of thousands of years and had remained in hibernation. Now for the Supreme Tournament, the 100 Lineages had appeared. This was the information that the Star Devourer's bodyguard knew, but he did not know if there were any other experts joining the Skyminder list. The Supreme Tournament was far more important than he had imagined. The Celestial Beast Empire's crown prince, the Death Bug bloodline, and the Star Devourer had all awakened and joined the tournament. The Hall of Honor was confident that they would hold the tournament, but it would not be easy to win. If the Astral Beast domain was like this, then the technocracy would definitely be the same, and there was also the sixth mainland. Lu Yin had thought that he would be able to sweep through his peers after becoming a hunter and awakening his second innate gift. Aside from the Prime Clear and a few others who could compete with him, no one else would be his match. But now it seemed that it was still too early. However, with his current strength, there was no need for him to fear anyone. Even in terms of raw power, he was not afraid of the Mavis family or the Star Devourer. Besides, he had an even more terrifying power. When he thought of this, Lu Yin subconsciously clutched at his heart. He felt that something was wrong and he looked down. This was not his own body but rather the body of a giant beast. This beast had a strange appearance and Lu Yin did not know what it was called. He looked into the distance and watched as the Star Devourer slowly swallowed the planet. He was speechless, there were so many monsters. Lu Yin watched as the Star Devourer swallowed a planet, but just as he was about to leave, another memory suddenly flooded into his mind. Run into a human powerhouse, Lu Yin. Think of a way to steal the tamed beast hidden in his arm. That tamed beast is called the Ghost Monkey. You must steal it back. Lu Yin was stunned. This memory came from the Celestial Beast Empire's state preceptor, Skyminder, who had ordered the Star Devourer to steal the Ghost Monkey. The monkey's identity had been exposed, and Skyminder had probably known about the monkey's existence from the very beginning. He had just been unable to make a move. Hold on, they must have known that the monkey had become Lu Yin's tamed beast during the battle in the mountain and sea realm. After that, the monkey had not been exposed at all. If they had known about the monkey's existence during the battle in the mountain and sea realm, then they must have known that Lu Yin had been captured by the witch spirit god. If that was the case, then why did they still think that there was someone who could compete with him? Unless the Astral Beast domain had already received news of his return. How long had it been? The Astral Beast domain had already received news of his return? That was too fast, and it was obvious that someone in the human domain had leaked the information. The Neo-Human Alliance had an Immortal list that recorded all the people who served the Neo-Human Alliance. The Astral Beast domain definitely had a similar list, but Lu Yin did not know what it was called. This protector who had fused with Lu Yin clearly did not know either. This was the importance of information. Chapter 1200. Lu Yin felt that the Innerverse and Neoverse needed their own information network as well. He suddenly thought of Zijing. Who would know more about Starlink Network than her? Unfortunately, Starlink Network belonged to the Hall of Honor, and it was even supervised by the Hall of Honor. The Hall of Honor had not hesitated to bestow a great world upon them, so it was impossible for them to be loyal to Lu Yin. As the scene in front of him changed, Lu Yin withdrew from the fusion and returned to his original body. He subconsciously checked his cosmic ring and to his dismay he discovered that there should have been 7.21 million star essence, but now there was only a measly 300,000 star essence left. He had used up 6.9 million star essence in an instant, which had been too fast. Still, it was worth it for him to learn so much. With 300,000 star essence left, Lu Yin did not hesitate and rolled his die again. This time he rolled 1 and a token fell out of the void. It should be some sort of imperial token as Lu Yin used a bit of force and it shattered. This sort of material could only be used by a certain star system's imperial authority. It could not even reach the level of a weave, so it was useless to him. He continued rolling his die, but this time he rolled 3 pips. There were no more star essence, so he gave up and tried again. On his last try, Lu Yin rolled 4 pips. Time stop space. The scene in front of Lu Yin changed and he entered the time stop space. 300,000 star essence could only increase the time by 200 days at most, but Lu Yin had enough star energy to condense star crystals. Although it was a little troublesome, he could still extend the time by nearly a year. Back when he had been in the giant eye of the mountain and sea realm, he had stayed there for nearly a year and raised his star energy control to the world realm. He had also comprehended a greater teleportation array. He did not know what the results would be this time. Lu Yin looked at the number displayed on the screen and then opened his cosmic ring to retrieve true insight. It was a dazzling golden color. There were 5 pages in total and it was time to take a look. True insight had a total of 36 pages, and it was stored in the Hall of Honor. It was a supreme tome for lockbreakers. Only boundless advanced lockbreakers could comprehend it, and even then they might not necessarily be able to comprehend it. Lu Yin had originally thought that his ability to comprehend a greater teleportation array would allow him to comprehend the source box array within true insight. However, he had underestimated it and overestimated himself. Perhaps the greater teleportation array that he had seen before was just a simplified version that was meant for disciples to study, so Qiushi could also comprehend it. In any case, Lu Yin did not really understand the source box array within true insight. How should he put it? This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. However, if he wanted to fully comprehend an array formation, he would need several years, perhaps even decades or even centuries. There were some source box array formations that people would never be able to fully comprehend in their lifetime. Lu Yin looked through all 5 pages of the source box array, and in the end he chose 1 page to comprehend. This should be the simplest source box array, and it was called the Origin Opening Array. Lu Yin did not know what it was used for, so he decided to comprehend it first. In any case, time had stopped. The main reason why one had to raise one's control of star energy to the world level in order to comprehend a source box array was because only a world-level cultivator would be able to mimic the killing intent of a source box array. Otherwise, one would have to find a source box that was identical to the killing intent of a source box array, which was almost impossible to find. To put it bluntly, a source box array was simply a simulation of the power of the previous generation's wisdom. First he would simulate and learn. Then he would transform the knowledge into his own comprehension. Finally, he would be able to set up his own source box array. It was rumored that the best origin array masters could see through the combination of multiple source boxes at a glance, and they could set up the most powerful source box array in the shortest amount of time. Right now, Lu Yin was struggling to even unlock a boundless advanced source box, let alone reach this step. Of course, he did not bite off more than he could chew. He would take it 1 step at a time, and there would come a day when he would completely comprehend it. Time was just a number to cultivators, and by the time Lu Yin excitedly discovered that he had comprehended the Origin Opening Array, there was not much time left. The Origin Opening Array was a source box array that protected one's spiritual force. Once this array was used, one's spiritual force would become as stable as a boulder. It might not be unbreakable, but it was at least much more stable than before. Lu Yin tested it out. If he had known the Origin Opening Array during his battle with Night King Zhenwu, then the Night King heaven-splitting technique would not have had much of an effect on him. Even if Night King Zhenwu had cheated with his innate gift, Lu Yin would not have been able to win, but he would not have lost either. Furthermore, the Origin Opening Array had an even more important effect, which was that it could nourish one's spiritual force. Although the effects were not that great, it was still better than slowly increasing it. Once there was a suitable way to strengthen one's spiritual force, then the Origin Opening Array would be even more perfect. Although this formation did not seem to be very useful as it could not attack, heal, or defend against physical attacks, the essence, energy, and spirit were the weak points of many people. Some people focused on cultivating the essence, energy, and spirit, and these people were usually very powerful. With the Origin Opening Array and the Stonewall Scriptures, Lu Yin could be considered to have made up for his spiritual force's weakness. At the very least, he would not have to worry about facing a spiritual force expert. Wait, why did he need to defend himself? Couldn't he take the initiative to learn stronger spiritual force attacks? This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Nightfall was useless against people like Night King Zhenwu, but it would still be very effective against other experts. If Lu Yin's spiritual force was strengthened even further, then he should be able to threaten peak experts like Yuhua Mavis. The more Lu Yin thought about it, the more he felt that he should improve his spiritual force. He just so happened to have a way to do so, and there was no other race in the universe that was more proficient in spiritual force than the Day-Night clan. Even the behemoths of the Neoverse were afraid of the Day-Night clan and did not want them to enter the Neoverse. The scene in front of him changed and Lu Yin appeared in a lock-breaking room. He relaxed for a long time and found that Xiaoxia and Xiaoqi were muttering about something. To them not much time had passed, but to Lu Yin, it had already been a year. This time span was different from other people's and Lu Yin was still not used to it. After returning to the lock-breaking room, Lu Yin raised his hand and the Day-Night clan's inheritance stone appeared in his palm. It was precisely because of this inheritance stone that the Day-Night banquet had been set up by Night King Zhenwu from start to finish. Night King Zhenwu had never thought of giving Lu Yin a way out, so he had never asked for the inheritance stone. He had always believed that he could definitely take it away from Lu Yin. Because of this, the inheritance stone had not been returned until now. Of course, it was also because the inheritance stone had not been returned that Night King Zhenwu had not withdrawn his accusations, which led to the subsequent troubles. Compared to these troubles, Lu Yin would rather have the inheritance stone. There was no doubt that the Day-Night clan was a powerful clan. Their spiritual force battle techniques were unparalleled in the universe, and this was what Lu Yin lacked. Even though he was enemies with the Day-Night royal family, Lu Yin had to admit that the Night King clan was very strong. With a longing for the Day-Night clan's spiritual force battle techniques in his heart, Lu Yin once again entered the inheritance corridor and returned to this familiar place. He saw the stone tablet outside the corridor, but Night King Zhenwu's name had disappeared from the top and was replaced by Zhou Day-Night's name. Even though Zhou Day-Night had led the Day King bloodline to betray the Day-Night clan and join the Great Eastern Alliance to go to the Outerverse, the Day-Night clan's ancestral land's stone tablet clearly did not distinguish between sides. Even Lu Yin's image could be entered, so there was no need to mention Zhou Day-Night. Even though the third chapter was less than the previous one, it was still Windborn's way of explaining things to his brothers. He had to go to work and write every day, and it was indeed tiring, but he still had to update. After that, the chapters would return to normal and there would be rewards and updates. The word count would be the same as normal. Thank you, brothers, for your support. End of chapter. Chapter 1201. Zhou Day-Night had replaced Night King Zhenwu as the first person on the ancestral land's stone stele. Her image was exceptionally dazzling to the Night King clan, and Lu Yin's image was even more dazzling. He was a traitor and an enemy. The third person was Zhanlong Day-Night, who had followed Zhou Day-Night to the Outerverse. He was also a traitor and a member of the Day King bloodline. The ancestral land's stone stele had these three people at the top, which caused the entire Day-Night clan to sink into depression. No one could surpass these three, and even Night Queen Yanqing, who was currently ranked 4th, could not do so. Ever since Lu Yin had killed Night King Zhenwu and stepped over the Day-Night clan to step into the Neoverse, the entire clan had been sealed off. The Day-Night flow zone was completely different from before, and the Day-Night clan's arrogance had gradually faded away. Even when Lu Yin had been captured by the Neo-Human Alliance, the Day-Night clan had not said a single word. Everyone was staring at the images on the stone stele, wanting to surpass these two. No matter how loathsome or arrogant the Day-Night clan was, they still had their own pride. They were one of the strongest clans in the universe, and they would not allow others to step on them. If they did not surpass Lu Yin's group, the Day-Night clan would not reappear. Pitiful people had their detestable aspects, but detestable people also had their respectable aspects. The Day-Night clan's actions caused the various powers of the Innerverse to raise their eyebrows. On this day, many Day-Night clansmen were sitting cross-legged beneath the stone stele in the ancestral land. They were trying their best to comprehend battle techniques and improve their images. Occasionally some would spit out blood, but they still persevered. Night King Dijiang was personally overseeing the situation below the stone stele, and he was staring at Night Queen Yanqing in the distance. Night King Zhenwu was dead, and Night Queen Yanqing was now the Day-Night clan's greatest hope. Her innate gift was extremely high, and even though she was still far from Night King Zhenwu's, it was not impossible for her to improve. He then looked at Night King Gu and secretly shook his head. Once one surpassed the younger generation, one's potential would only decrease, not increase. He then looked at the other Night King clansmen and was dissatisfied. He then looked at the Day-Night clan and shook his head again. This generation of the Day-Night clan had produced many geniuses with innate gifts. The clan's elders had once said that this generation's destiny would all belong to the true martial sect, but that was not the case. Zhou Day-Night, Zhanlong Day-Night, and even Night Queen Yanqing all possessed innate gifts that surpassed the average person. However, aside from Night Queen Yanqing, all of these geniuses were traitors. Night King Dijiang's gaze turned sinister as he recalled the scene where he had been suppressed by High Saint's divine might. His entire body erupted with killing intent, and the entire ancestral land trembled. Beneath the stone tablet, many of the Day-Night clan members felt their blood run cold, but none of them dared to make a sound. During this period of time, they had experienced this feeling too many times. They were constantly on the brink of death. Not far away, the elder from the Night King bloodline sighed, not daring to speak either. The dignified Day-Night clan had been turned upside down by a mere junior, and everyone was responsible for that. Night King Yuanjing's gaze turned cold. Luin, that bastard. If he had known that such a day would come, he would have eliminated this scourge first, but it was too late now. With that in mind, he looked up at the top of the stone stele at Lu Yin's image and felt as if he could devour him. Suddenly, Lu Yin's image flickered before surpassing Zhou Day-Night to reach the top of the stone tablet. Night King Yuanjing was aghast and he stared in disbelief as if he had seen a ghost. At the same time, the others had also noticed this scene. Many Day-Night clan members had entered the Inheritance Stone to comprehend battle techniques, and they had risked their lives in order to rely on the stimulation provided by the three people at the very top. Now Lu Yin had leaped to the very top and appeared at Night King Zhenwu's original position, which was why he was immediately discovered by others. The Day-Night clan's ancestral land was silent as everyone stared blankly at the top. Night King Dijiang was stunned, and the killing intent in his eyes reached an unprecedented level. Zhou Day-Night had only reached the top after comprehending the Day King's ultimate technique, Night's End, Daybreak. This Lu Yin had actually surpassed her. What had he comprehended? Could it be? The back of the inheritance corridor was still as dark as ever. This was not Lu Yin's first time here, and he was already very familiar with it. He had entered the depths of the inheritance corridor before, and this time he had directly reached the original limit. It was here that he had comprehended nightfall. Now he could take another step forward and slowly approach the deepest part of the corridor. As he took a step forward, a shocking slash appeared in front of him. It was not a real slash but one that was driven by spiritual force. This was the Night King Heaven-Splitting Technique. Lu Yin had not expected to comprehend the Night King Heaven-Splitting Technique just by taking a step forward. He was excited as he silently recited the Stonewall scriptures and stared straight ahead. He was well aware of how powerful the Night King Heaven-Splitting Technique was, as he had experienced it more than once. If not for the Stonewall scriptures, he would have long since died to this battle technique. Now he was actually able to learn it. Night King Zhenwu's ultimate technique, which was also the first Night King's silent battle technique, had finally unveiled its mysterious veil in front of Lu Yin. There were two ways to comprehend the Day-Night clan's ultimate battle techniques. The first was to enter the corridor, as their innate gifts would help them comprehend battle techniques. For example, Zhanlong Day-Night had comprehended the Day-Night restoration technique as soon as he entered the corridor. The second method was to advance with one's own strength. As long as one could reach the deepest part of the corridor, they would be able to comprehend any battle technique. This was Lu Yin's method. He was not a member of the Day-Night clan, and the clan's battle techniques would not allow him to comprehend them. After an unknown amount of time, the scene in front of Lu Yin's eyes disappeared. He was excited. This was the Night King Heaven-Splitting Technique. He raised his hand and a strange power gathered. It was his spiritual force, which then transformed into a sharp slash that tore through the void. He had not reached Night King Zhenwu's level of strength with the Night King Heaven-Splitting Technique, but he was still much stronger than the others. Lu Yin had always felt that Nightfall was not strong enough, but now he finally had a powerful spiritual force attack. He did not stop and continued forward as he was only an arm's length away from the wall at the end of the corridor. Lu Yin could not understand how such a powerful spiritual force could be withstood by a young person. Even the old freaks from the Daoist royal family who were close to becoming emissaries might not be able to withstand it. Fortunately, he had the Stonewall scriptures and he had also comprehended the origin opening array. This gave him a deeper understanding of spiritual force, which was why he had been able to endure until now. He took a step forward, and this step was the moment he surpassed Zhou Xian and reached the top of the Daoist clan's ancestral land's stone tablet. In front of him was the end of the corridor and Lu Yin saw a mural on the wall. He could not understand it, but it seemed to be describing something that had happened in ancient times. It was probably a scene of a battle. Lu Yin studied it carefully. He had not received any battle technique inheritance, so he could only look at the mural. He looked at the vivid images of the characters, all sorts of creatures and even a cloud. Lu Yin's expression was solemn as he stared at the mural. There was a cloud symbol on a woman's clothes. That symbol represented the power that held the remnants of the mountain and sea realm's spiritual force, and that power represented the dream finger. Lu Yin had never expected to see such a symbol in the Daoist clan's inheritance corridor. It represented a power and a certain will. It also represented his extreme rage and hatred. Who exactly did this symbol represent? Lu Yin's breathing quickened and he wanted to see it more clearly. He endured the spiritual force suppression and took another step forward. He placed a hand on the mural at the end of the corridor, and at the same time, a finger descended through the void. Lu Yin's pupils shrank. The dream finger? Oh. His expression changed. The finger in front of him contained day and night. This was the Daoist clan's spiritual force battle technique. At that moment he seemed to hear 5 words. Night King's immortal descending finger. It was clearly the same, but it was also different. Lu Yin could not help but raise his hand and tap out with his finger to meet the Night King's immortal descending finger. It seemed the same, but one was a fingertip battle technique that contained an indescribable charm, while the other was a spiritual force battle technique that contained an irresistible pressure. They seemed the same, but they were definitely not the same battle technique. However, they definitely originated from the same battle technique. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. This battle technique had appeared at the end of the corridor, but its power was not as strong as the Night King's heaven-splitting technique. Either he had comprehended it in the wrong direction, or this battle technique represented a special meaning that was not just a battle technique. This battle technique was definitely related to the dream finger, and it was also related to the power represented by the cloud symbol. After comprehending the Night King's immortal descending finger, the spiritual force pressure that had been suppressing the entire corridor suddenly disappeared. Lu Yin raised a hand to touch the mural, and it felt as if he had touched upon an ancient scene. There was only one mural at the end of the corridor and there was nothing special about it. No matter how Lu Yin touched it, he could not find any treasures. Half a day later he retracted his hand, but there was nothing there. This was the end of the Daoist clan's inheritance corridor, and there was only the Night King's immortal descending finger. He was not disappointed, as he now knew that the Daoist clan might be related to the power represented by the cloud symbol. Lu Yin turned around and left the corridor. He had only taken a few steps when his body suddenly stopped and he froze in place. At this moment, what appeared in front of him was not the corridor but the heavens. There were countless interstellar battleships and countless space-exploring experts were kneeling on one knee. Greetings, Alliance Leader. Greetings, Alliance Leader. Greetings, Alliance Leader. In the distance, the astral river was resplendent and everyone on the giant ark was kneeling on one knee as well. After crossing the astral river, Lu Yin saw the Blaze Realm, the Blazing Mist Flow Zone and the Daoist Flow Zone. He saw powerhouses that had once stood tall in the heavens, and the powerful clans that had once illuminated the universe were all kneeling before him. He then looked past the Innerverse and saw the Cosmic Sea, the Neoverse, the Glory Realm and the entire Realm Mountain. Everyone was kneeling before him and everyone was submitting to him. At this moment he had reached the pinnacle of his life and he stood at the peak of the entire human domain. No one was above him and he could look down on everyone else. He was the master of this universe. Lu Yin blinked, stunned. What was going on? Suddenly he thought of something and his lips curled up. So that was how it was. It seemed that Night's End, daybreak was not only hidden in the bloodline of the Day King clan, but also in this corridor. Night's End, daybreak and the Day King had used an era-soundless battle technique that was known as the most powerful illusion. Even if one knew that this was an illusion, they would still fall into it. Back when Zhou Xian had used Night's End, daybreak, she had almost caused Night King Zhenwu to fall for it. The gap between the two of them was enormous, which showed just how powerful Night's End daybreak was. Lu Yin had not held much hope for Night's End daybreak, but he had not expected to actually comprehend it. Chapter 1202. The Inheritance Corridor represented the entire Day-Night clan's inheritance, and Night's End daybreak was naturally part of it. Lu Yin had walked to the innermost part and touched the mural, which meant that he had opened up the Inheritance Corridor. Naturally, he could comprehend all of the Day-Night clan's battle techniques, and Night's End daybreak was no exception. At that moment, the space around Lu Yin changed once again. All of the people who had submitted to him transformed into a beam of light that condensed together to form a slash that could split the universe apart. Lu Yin's expression changed, and he immediately recited the Stonewall scriptures. His footsteps were light as he tried to dodge the attack. His body slammed into the corridor's stone wall with a bang, and Lu Yin regained his senses. Everything around him had changed once again, and he had returned to the Inheritance Corridor. He looked around and touched his forehead. He had been given a fright. He had almost been chopped to death. This was Night's End daybreak. Even though he knew that it was an illusion, he had still almost fallen for it. As he panted, the scene from before appeared in his mind once again. Lu Yin's expression changed. No, this wasn't Night's End daybreak. This was the Day-Night's tribute? The Day-Night clan was very powerful, especially after the birth of the Night King and Day King, who had stunned the world for a long time. However, even the Night King and Day King had not been able to bring the Day-Night clan into the Neoverse, which meant that there were still many powers that surpassed the Day-Night clan. The Day-Night's tribute was the result of their combined efforts. The combination of the Night King heaven-opening technique and Night's End daybreak was unexpectedly effective. It was as if they had superimposed their attack power, and it had once killed an absolute expert who had surpassed them. This had also led to the Day King's death. Even the Day-Night clan's history did not record how the Day King had died. There were many theories, but the Day-Night's tribute was actually a trigger. Not only had the Day-Night clan angered the power behind that expert's death, but the Day-Night's tribute had also raised the Day-Night clan's status to another level, causing some people to feel apprehensive. The Day-Night's tribute was a technique that allowed the user to endlessly use the Night King heaven-opening technique within the illusion of Night's End. Night's End daybreak's specialty was to cause people to fall into a trance and use the illusion to cause irreversible damage. Regardless of whether one was within or outside of the illusion, such damage would occur. If the Night King heaven-opening technique's infinite attacks were added into the mix, then how terrifying would it be? Lu Yin's breathing quickened. This should be the final legacy of the entire corridor. Day-Night's tribute. It was no wonder why Night King Zhenwu had always wanted to obtain Night's End daybreak. He must have known about the Day-Night's tribute, and once he grasped it, his power would be completely different. Lu Yin could imagine Night King Zhenwu using Night's End daybreak to drown everyone and then unleashing the Night King heaven-splitting technique without limit. This sort of attack technique could even be used by all of the top powerhouses on the Golden Stage. Shiju had broken through to the Enlighter realm because he did not have a sufficient foundation, but Day-Night's salute was Night King Zhenwu's foundation. If Night King Zhenwu was able to master the Day-Night's tribute and break through to the Enlighter realm, then Lu Yin was absolutely certain that Night King Zhenwu would become one of the top powerhouses in the mountain and sea realm. Yuhua Mavis had gathered great mastery of strength, and she had also gathered great mastery of her domain without being able to see the light. As for Night King Zhenwu, he had gathered great mastery of his spiritual force. Both of them represented some sort of pinnacle, and now this pinnacle had been given to Lu Yin. Lu Yin stayed under the Inheritance Stone for more than 10 days. These 10 days were extremely difficult for the Day-Night clan, and everyone stared blankly at Lu Yin's name at the top of the Ancestral Land's stone tablet. Anger, helplessness, and sullenness filled the hearts of the Day-Night clan members. Even Night King Dijiang stared at Lu Yin's image in a daze. In the future, once this young man matured, would the Day-Night clan still have room to survive? Dijiang really wanted to eliminate this person, but it was already too late. Night Queen Yanqing clenched her fists as she stared at Lu Yin's image. The gap between her and this person was growing wider and wider, to the point where it made her feel despair. Would she be able to surpass him in the future? On a planet in the Lockbreaker realm, Lu Yin walked out feeling a little dizzy. He had cultivated his spiritual force too much, but it was very refreshing. He had finally made up for his shortcomings in spiritual force, and if he could also master the method of using his domain without being able to see the light, then it would be even more perfect. When he walked out of the lockbreaker room, Lu Yin saw not only Xiaoxia and Xiaoqi, but also a personal spacecraft. Its appearance was stunning and it had a streamlined design. It was completely black and looked very handsome. More importantly, it was a collapsible spacecraft, a black hole-grade Aurora Universal collapsible spacecraft. It was rumored to be a product that had yet to be developed. The two mushroom-headed youths circled around the spacecraft with envious expressions on their faces. Lu Yin appeared. Whose spacecraft is this? Aside from the three of them, he did not sense anyone else on the planet. The two mushroom-headed youths were startled, and when they saw that it was Lu Yin, Xiaoxia enviously said, "It's yours." Xiaoqi continued, "Any lockbreaker who reaches the boundless advanced lockbreaker realm will receive a reward from the Lockbreaker Society. Your reward is a black hole-grade Aurora Universal collapsible spacecraft and 2 million star essence." Lu Yin was stunned, but then he was overjoyed. "Really? It's all mine?" Xiaoqi nodded and opened her hand to reveal a red Mavis Bank card. "There are 2 million star essence here. It's the Lockbreaker Society's reward for you." Lu Yin had not expected to receive such benefits, as the Lockbreaker Society was too generous. Aside from the black hole-grade Aurora Universal collapsible spacecraft and 2 million star essence, this planet in the Lockbreaker realm was also a reward. In addition, he had unlocked a boundless advanced source box, and the items he had obtained were also his. There were 16 grains of fates, and he had given 2 to the two mushroom-headed youths, so he still had 14 grains of fates, and currently he was fusing the grains of fates and into his heart, concealing the black and white fog. The Lockbreaker Society was truly wealthy, but wasn't it too much to be given so many benefits after reaching the boundless advanced Lockbreaker realm? Did other lockbreakers who reached the boundless advanced Lockbreaker realm also receive so many rewards? As he was thinking about this, Lu Yin suddenly recalled something. He had been the Great Eastern Alliance's alliance leader for so many years, but he had never received any benefits from the alliance. This was clearly not right. When he had become the Great Yu Empire's royal regent, the Great Yu Empire's economy had collapsed, and they had needed his assistance. However, things were different now, as both the Great Eastern Alliance and the Great Yu Empire should be paying him a salary. Everyone knew how important money was to Lu Yin, and when he thought that someone might be deducting his salary, Lu Yin became unhappy. He could not wait any longer and immediately contacted Enya. Fortunately, he had a gadget specially provided by the Starlink network company, or else he would not have been able to contact her. Enya's voice soon came through. "Your Highness." Lu Yin grunted and thought for a moment before asking, "Enya, how's the outer verse?" "Everything is going well. Please rest assured, Your Highness." Lu Yin grunted again. "Right, as the Great Eastern Alliance's alliance leader, hasn't the alliance given me any benefits?" Enya was stunned. Benefits? This was a new term, as words like benefits were rarely used to cultivators. "Your Highness, in the first year that the alliance was established, this subordinate helped Your Highness obtain a Mavis Bank crystal card and personally handed it to Zhou Ran." Lu Yin raised his brows as he felt like he had been scammed. Zhou Ran could lose her memories at any time. "Zhou Ran didn't hand it over to Your Highness?" Enya asked. Lu Yin replied, "I forgot. Can you tell me how much money is there?" Enya replied, "Please wait a moment, Your Highness." Lu Yin was looking forward to it. Not long after, Enya spoke again. "My apologies, Your Highness. The alliance has only been established for a short period of time, and the resources that the entire Outerverse has contributed to Your Highness aren't that much." Lu Yin's heart sank. "However, the amount will increase every year. As the alliance's interactions become more frequent, the number of shipping routes will increase, and the economy will strengthen. Your Highness benefits will also increase accordingly," Enya continued. "Just tell me how much money is there," Lu Yin said as he no longer held any expectations. Enya replied, 11,520,000 star essence. Lu Yin was stunned as he suspected that he had misheard. "How much did you say?" 11,520,000 star essences, Enya repeated. Lu Yin was speechless. How was that little? However, he soon realized who he was. He was the master of the Outerverse, and although the resources of the Outerverse could not compare to the Innerverse, they were not that far off. An Outerverse master who had been in the Outerverse for nearly 8 years would only earn a little more than 10 million star essence, which was indeed very little. Even the leaders of the Innerverse 8 Great Flow Zones would not be able to earn that much after 8 years, let alone the master of the Outerverse. Your Highness, the Alliance has only been established for a short period of time, and we have yet to fully integrate ourselves. We still need to build an army, and we've already waged war against the Day-Night Flow Zone and Blazing Mist Flow Zone. There are also various losses. Enya was interrupted by Lu Yin before she could finish. Alright, I understand. There's nothing else. Enya softly replied, Yes, Your Highness. Lu Yin ended the call with an excited look on his face. 10 million star essence was indeed very little compared to the master of the Outerverse, but he had never expected to gain anything from it. This amount of money was basically free money, and as the master of the Outerverse, the benefits that he would receive would be far greater than this amount of money. If not for his position as the Great Eastern Alliance's Alliance Master, then how would he have been able to resist the Day-Night Flow Zone? If he had been able to delay the Blazing Mist Flow Zone, then these were his true benefits. Even more importantly, he had taken control of the Outerverse and left his name in history. Compared to these benefits, a measly amount of star essence was nothing. In Lu Yin's opinion, 10 million star essence was free money, and the further he went, the more he would be able to obtain. That girl Zhao Ran was too unreliable, and he had almost lost that much money. If he had not suddenly thought of asking about it, he would have suffered a loss. Today's a good day. Hey, your hairstyles aren't bad, Lu Yin sighed. He was very happy, and his words stunned the 2 mushroom-haired girls. Thanks for the compliment. Mushroom hair is a man's romance. Xiaoqi was happy as she felt that Lu Yin had been enlightened. Xiaoshi looked at Lu Yin expectantly. Do you want a mushroom hairstyle as well? That way we won't be the Qixi duo anymore. Lu Yin hurriedly waved his hands as Xiaoshi was trying to intimidate him. Wudi's punishment was over, and he immediately contacted Lu Yin to take him to Everlasting Sky Island. Lu Yin bid farewell to Xiaoshi and Xiaoqi. The 2 mushroom-haired girls were obviously reluctant to part with him. You must not randomly lock break. It'll bring about disaster, and it'll be very, very scary. Xiaoshi waved his hand. Xiaoqi waved back. How about a mushroom hairstyle? It's a man's romance. Lu Yin left the lockbreaker world without looking back, as he was afraid that someone would see him with the 2 mushroom-haired girls. The Qixi duo. The Qixi trio. Just the thought of it was terrifying. Chapter 1203. Lu Yin had just exited the lockbreaker realm when he saw Invincible Heizage. Invincible Heizage didn't seem affected, and he smiled at Lu Yin. You've gained quite a bit over the past 2 days. Lu Yin replied, I'm just lucky. Are you alright, senior brother Invincible? Invincible Heizage's lips twitched. I'm fine. Right, did you tell junior brother Leon that you're safe? Invincible Heizage asked. Lu Yin nodded. I did. Heizage Leon was the pirate king, and Lu Yin felt that something was off about contacting him in the glory realm. Invincible Heizage continued, when you were captured by the Neo-Human Alliance, junior brother Leon was the most anxious. He had a huge argument with junior brother Shenwei and was even angry with Master. Master agreed that once you're out of danger, you can come to my Eversky Island and choose any battle techniques or even secret techniques as compensation. Lu Yin was delighted as his luck had been too good recently. First he had broken through to become a hunter, then he had solved the problem with method, reclaimed the Great Eastern Alliance, become a boundless advanced lockbreaker, comprehended the Day-Night's tribute, and obtained more than 10 million star essence. Now he could even obtain more. Lu Yin felt that these gains were too surreal. Was he still stuck in the illusion of Night's End Day? The battle in the mountain and sea realm had left a deep impression on him. He had thought that defeating Night King Zhenwu would allow him to stand at the peak, but the peak was even higher. He had been a spectator from the start of that battle, even after defeating Yu Weep. Now, considering his current level of strength, he was confident that he wouldn't need to fear anyone in the mountain and sea realm. Other than the Prime Clear One, no one could pose a threat to him. Senior brother Invincible, what kind of battle techniques does Eversky Island have? Lu Yin asked curiously. Invincible Heizage raised his head. That's too many. My Eversky Island has 13 ultimate techniques that are famous throughout the universe. We have battle techniques, secret techniques and sourcebox arrays. You can learn anything you want. Lu Yin was shocked. There's even sourcebox arrays? Invincible Heizage laughed. That's right. Can I only learn one? Lu Yin hurriedly asked. Invincible Heizage laughed. Kid, one is enough for you. How many more do you want to learn? Right, you just became a boundless advanced lockbreaker. Are you eager to learn sourcebox arrays? Lu Yin nodded in anticipation. Superior Sage shook his head. Sourcebox arrays aren't something that an ordinary person can comprehend. The number of lockbreakers at the Lockbreaker Society's boundless advanced level can be counted on 2 hands, and those who can comprehend sourcebox arrays are few and far between. You should stabilize your lockbreaking ability first. With your innate gift, you should be able to attempt to come into contact with sourcebox arrays within the next 2 years and try to comprehend them, but don't get your hopes up. It seemed like he already knew 2 sourcebox array formations. It was a pity that he could not reveal his greater teleportation array. If only he could become a disciple of the Sirius sect one day, then he would be able to make his greater teleportation array official. Senior, is there a Mavis Bank near the border mountain? Lu Yin asked. Heizage Wudi nodded. Go. I'll take you there. The Mavis Banks are all over the universe. I heard that the Mavis family lives on the back of a gigantic tortoise. Lu Yin asked curiously. That's right. That tortoise is known as the ancestral tortoise. No one knows how long it's been alive, not even Elder Zen or Master. All we know is that its existence is part of a gap in history. There's a tree on its back, and it was that tree that gave birth to the Mavis family. The Mavis family was born from a tree. Who knows? The Mavis family has their own secrets, and so does our Everlasting Island. Some people even say that our Everlasting Island is related to the Mavis family, but that's completely false. I'm just curious. How did the Mavis family earn so much money? Lu Yin was curious. Heizage Wudi smiled. Money is just a foreign object. If you're willing, my Everlasting Island can do the same. When your strength reaches a certain level, some things will become simple. Don't think too much about money. Lu Yin nodded seriously. Cultivators could not place too much importance on money. Of course, Lu Yin was an exception. He wished that Heizage Leon's backer was not Everlasting Island, but rather the Mavis family. That would be perfect. In front of them, a large tree pierced through the clouds, its branches draped with branches and star essence. Lu Yin pursed his lips. In the outerverse, the Mavis Bank's tree draped with universal currency, but here, it was directly draped with star essence. The Mavis Bank was simply too rich. The tree was so large that it almost covered an entire mountain range. There were billions of branches, and the star essence draped from it was at least tens of millions or even billions of cubes. This was the reason why the Mavis clan was so confident in the World Mountain. They were rich. This was definitely the richest branch of the Mavis Bank, and there was no other branch that could compare to it. This was the Realm Mountain, the peak of humanity. Lu Yin smoothly withdrew all of his assets from the Mavis Bank, including the crystal card that was still with Zhou Ran. He had thought that it would be very difficult to withdraw the money from it. 10 million star essence was not considered a lot in this branch, and at least, it was not enough to attract the person in charge. There were just too many important people here. Enya also sent Lu Yin a detailed list of his annual benefits. Lu Yin took a look and was surprised to find that the more he progressed, the more his benefits would increase. Before he had dealt with the day-night flow zone, the benefits that the Alliance had given him had almost been the sum of all the benefits that he had received in the past few years. He was looking forward to it, and he thought back to the land where the Sixth Mainland had transported resources. There had been a continuous mountain range, and he had no idea how many star essence there were. If he could have that many star essence, then he would have more confidence. But for now it was still okay. Before coming to the Realm Mountain, very few people had recognized Lu Yin, but now that he had left, there were many who recognized him. Elder Chan's attitude towards Lu Yin had been very clear, and many within the Hall of Honor had determined that Lu Yin was not someone to be provoked. As he looked back at the Realm Mountain, Lu Yin did not know when he would be back again. Senior Wudi, how do I get a world? Lu Yin suddenly thought of something and asked. Wudi replied, it's not simple. The materials are hard to come by, and the Hall of Honor forbids the long-term existence of a world outside the Glory Realm. Once it's discovered, it's immediately taken back. Otherwise, there would have been people rushing to buy it. Lu Yin was disappointed, But he did not expect to be able to obtain a world right now. Senior Wudi, do you know about the general appointing platform? Wudi's eyes flashed and he looked at Lu Yin. Why do you ask? Lu Yin replied, back then I was almost killed by Night King Zhenwu because of the general appointing platform. That's why I want to take it away as a memento and also as a way to encourage my cultivation. I can even buy it. Wudi shook his head. Don't even think about buying it. The Hall of Honor will never sell it to you. The general appointing platform is not ordinary, so don't even think about it in the future. Lu Yin grunted and his eyes flickered. Could the general appointing platform be the same as his second innate gift? If it was, then the owner of the platform might be related to him. Innate gifts could be passed down through one's bloodline, and an unrelated general appointing platform should not appear in the universe. Lu Yin left the Realm Mountain and headed towards Everlasting Island. At this moment in the Outerverse, Yumu was cautiously submitting a video to the upper echelons. This video was a recording of Lu Yin's battle with him, and he had highlighted the giant's right arm. What are you trying to say? A low voice came from a terminal. Yumu replied, this is the giant's technology and it should belong to a destroyed race. I'm wondering if this Lu Yin is related to that branch of giants. Even if he's related, it has nothing to do with us. Shamrock Enterprises wasn't the one that destroyed that branch of giants. Yumu continued, if Lu Yin can control the giant's technology, then he might be able to recreate the glory of the giant civilization. Don't forget that the giant civilization was destroyed because they posed too great of a threat. Lu Yin has been in the Outerverse for so many years, and he has grasped too many external powers. These might have come from the giant civilization. The other side fell silent. Yumu was unwilling to accept this. Are you planning to give up on the giant civilization? There is civilization that can rival an emissary's power armor, and even the Hall of Honor is wary of them. I understand. I'll look into it. Yumu hung up. Yumu sighed and looked at the video. Don't blame me, Lu Yin. You can only blame yourself for being too sharp. The universe isn't that simple and what you see isn't that bright. Far away from Yumu, Wei Rong was conversing with someone. This person was young but pretended to be mature, but his eyes were filled with unease, vigilance and curiosity about the future. There was even a trace of excitement. This was the kind of gaze that Wei Rong liked the most. There was another person standing beside Wei Rong, a woman named Lily Rose. Brother Page, what kind of help can we provide to your Tinderflame Alliance? Or rather, to what extent can we help you? Wei Rong asked with a smile. Lily Rose clenched her fists and looked at Page expectantly. This day had finally arrived. Page took a few deep breaths and excitedly replied, we have a plan. Wei Rong smiled brilliantly. Of course, I like to work with people who have a plan, and His Highness will be happy to hear that. Then we can discuss this. The Blaze Realm is a good place. Page nodded vigorously. Wei Rong smiled. In the entire Great Eastern Alliance, Lu Yin had the highest status while Wang Wen, Enya and a few others were just below him. Wei Rong did not have much actual authority, but he was something like a military advisor. He could mobilize some of the Great Eastern Alliance's hidden forces, such as gathering intelligence or giving orders to Aegis assassins. Before speaking with Page, he had issued an order to search for the Sylvan Dragon hidden in the Outerverse, Long Erwo. Wei Rong was a strategist on the battlefield and he could see through the situation of a battle with a single glance. He could determine the outcome of a battle through his ever-changing arrangements, and he could even use factors outside of the battlefield to determine the outcome of a battle. Wang Wen was the exact opposite of Wei Rong. He did not participate in wars, or rather he was too lazy to participate in them. His gaze had long since transcended wars and was now focused on the entire universe. Wars were for profit and Wang Wen liked to reap the greatest benefits. At this moment in Iron Blood Weave, Wang Wen was looking at a star chart of the Innerverse. This day is almost here. Interesting. This is something that no one has ever done before. I wonder to what extent Chess Piece Bro will be able to accomplish it. His gaze then shifted from the Blaze Realm's star chart to another location, and his gaze gradually grew fervent. Chapter 1204. Within a brothel in the Neoverse, Mingyu looked uneasy as she glanced outside. Every time she heard footsteps she would panic. Suddenly there was a knock on the door and her expression changed. Who is it? The door opened and Huan Yang entered with a smile. Mingyu, you still haven't contacted Lu Yin? He's been out for a long time. Mingyu gritted her teeth. Give me some more time. Huan Yang's expression changed and her gaze turned cold. How long? A year. 10 years. 100 years. Mingyu's face paled. She had lied about Lu Yin marrying her in order to get young Master Tian to give up on her. Huan Yang had not dared to provoke Lu Yin and her plan had succeeded. But who would have thought that Lu Yin would come out and even be granted his freedom? When she found out that Lu Yin had come out, she knew that she was done for. She could not contact him at all, let alone marry him. You can't bring anything into the mountain and sea realm, so Lu Yin only told me how to contact him after he came out. I can't contact him, Mingyu said through gritted teeth. Huan Yang snorted. Really? Mingyu was resolute. Of course. Huan Yang's eyes flickered as she was not sure if Mingyu was telling the truth. I hope you're not lying to me. It doesn't matter if you lie to me, but if you lie to young Master Tian, you know the consequences. No one can protect you. She then turned and left, heading to another room where Ming Yan was. Huan Yang was almost certain that Mingyu was lying, but no matter what, the top courtesan needed to be replaced and Ming Yan was next. Huan Yang had to prepare Ming Yan properly and ensure that nothing unexpected happened. When she entered Ming Yan's room, Huan Yang's attitude was not as gentle as she had been with Mingyu. You'll replace Mingyu as the new top courtesan in a few months. The brothel will promote you then, so don't let anything happen to you. Ming Yan's back was to Huan Yang as she replied, there won't be any accidents. She then picked up a cup of water and slowly brought it to her lips. She drank very slowly, very slowly. It was a normal action, but Huan Yang's expression changed, and she hurriedly grabbed Ming Yan's arm and snatched the cup away. She stared at Ming Yan. What are you doing? Ming Yan turned and calmly looked at Huan Yang. What do you mean, what am I doing? Huan Yang frowned and looked at the water in the cup. Ming Yan's action just now made her uneasy. She thought that Ming Yan wanted to poison the water to commit suicide. But after thinking about it, it was impossible. This place was always under surveillance, so it was impossible for there to be poison. Ming Yan smiled. You took my cup. Looking at Ming Yan, Huan Yang's heart became more and more uneasy, but she didn't know where this uneasiness came from. She always felt that something was wrong. Huan Yang threw the cup away and looked at Ming Yan. Just as she was about to speak, she suddenly spat out a mouthful of blood. Her hair quickly turned white and she felt powerless. She almost fell to the ground. She had been poisoned. She glared fiercely at Ming Yan. You poisoned me? Ming Yan approached Huan Yang step by step. I told you, you took my cup. Huan Yang looked at the cup that was thrown away. Is there poison on the cup? How is that possible? Where did you get the poison from? Huan Yang was in disbelief. She was an enlighter, but Ming Yan wasn't even an explorer. Huan Yang was in disbelief. Huan Yang suddenly attacked Ming Yan. Ming Yan narrowed her eyes and said, Look at your own hand. Huan Yang paused and looked at her hand. It was withered and old. She frantically rolled up her sleeves, and her skin wrinkled as if she had aged several decades. What poison is this? What poison did you use? Ming Yan calmly looked at Huan Yang and raised a hand to point in 3 directions. These 3 directions were where Huan Yang had sent people to watch over Ming Yan. Ming Yan wasn't even an explorer, but her guards were all hunters. One of them was even an enlighter, but she had still been able to detect them. Furthermore, Ming Yan had dared to attack, but the guards hadn't reacted at all. It was obvious that they had been dealt with. Huan Yang couldn't figure out how Ming Yan had done it, and she felt her strength drain away. She had never been good at fighting. Ming Yan looked down at Huan Yang with an icy gaze. Her poison had come from the Neo-Human Alliance's poison of life, and it had never been exposed. Otherwise, no matter how strong the poison was, it wouldn't have been able to succeed if others had been prepared. She had used this time to slowly infect the 3 guards with her poison, and now she had turned the tables and taken control of Huan Yang. Huan Yang was naturally unwilling to be controlled, but the poison of life was too strong, and she couldn't even stand properly. She glanced at the door. Wherever she went, there would be people following her, and they would definitely be able to sense that something was wrong. When the time came, this girl wouldn't be able to resist, and she would have to hand over the antidote. Who are you waiting for? Someone to protect you? Or someone who is also watching you? Ming Yan asked. As soon as she spoke, the door opened and Ming Yu walked in. She didn't look as uneasy as Huan Yang had seen earlier. On the contrary, there was a trace of ridicule in her eyes. Huan Yang instantly understood that the two of them had joined forces. She also understood why the guards who had been watching Ming Yan had been poisoned. With Ming Yu's cooperation, it had been easy to poison them. Ming Yu was a hunter, and any hunter in the younger generation could challenge those who were a realm breaker. Even if she hadn't used poison, Ming Yu's strength would have been enough to deal with the three guards, but that would have alerted the brothel. Ming Yan's poison was different. Huan Yang looked at the two girls. One was the current courtesan Belle, while the other was the future courtesan Belle. She had actually been tricked by these two girls. Ming Yu glanced at Huan Yang's hand and then fearfully looked at Ming Yan. "You've achieved your goal. What do you plan to do next? Escape from the brothel?" Ming Yan shook her head. "I want to take back what belongs to me." Ming Yu didn't understand. She really wanted to escape from the brothel. Ming Yan looked at Ming Yu. "Can you escape? Although there aren't many brothels, that young Master Tion's status shouldn't be low. Once you escape, there's a high chance that you'll be captured." Ming Yu's eyes flickered, but she didn't answer. Huan Yang collapsed to the ground and panted heavily as she watched herself age. She looked at Ming Yan in horror. "What kind of poison did you use? Give me the antidote and I promise that I won't make things difficult for you again. I swear." Ming Yan looked at Huan Yang. "Do you think that we can escape from the Neoverse?" Huan Yang did not hesitate. "Impossible. Behind the brothels is the Forgotten Lands Black Street. The Black Street is filled with outlaws who have been isolated and abandoned in the Neoverse. These people are well informed, and the Black Street Master has a grasp of the situation in the Neoverse. You won't be able to escape, so don't even think about it. I swear that I won't make things difficult for you." Ming Yu gritted her teeth. She was a scheming person, and the more she thought about it, the more fearful she became of the brothels. She had heard of the Black Street before, and even if she escaped to the Outerverse, there would still be people hunting her down unless she married Lu Yin. "The universe is vast and there's no place for you," Ming Yan said indifferently. Ming Yu looked at her. "What do you want?" Ming Yan and Ming Yu looked at each other. "Let's cooperate and take down the brothels." Ming Yu was stunned as if she had just heard something unbelievable. Huan Yang was also stunned, and then her expression turned strange. It seemed like she was mocking Ming Yu, but it also contained the fear of being poisoned. It was as if she had heard the funniest joke in the world, but she did not dare to laugh. "Do you know what the brothels represent? Do you know what the Black Street behind them represents? You want to control the brothels?" Ming Yu cried out. Ming Yan looked at her calmly. "With my poison I can do it." Ming Yu did not believe her at all. Ming Yan had been the empress of Shenwu continent for many years, and even though she had split into two personalities, she could still see Ming Yu's misgivings. "Let's try. If we fail, I have a backup plan that can guarantee that we can escape unscathed." Ming Yu's eyes flashed and she looked at Ming Yan in disbelief. If there was a backup plan, why would they be sent to a brothel? Ming Yan looked at her gadget and her lips curled up into a smile. "I'm Lu Yin's woman." In the Sinew Eternal Southern World, the 7 courts resided in the land of Spirit Void, where the Ku family resided. The land of Spirit Void was the Ku family's land of inheritance. Spirit Void was the origin of the land's name. The land of Spirit Void was ravaged by lightning all year round, and there were many withered trees growing on the land. These were the raw materials for the Ku family's power vessel, the Time-Withering Tree. In a corner of the land within a mountain range, 2 giant beasts roared and tore at each other. Both beasts had the strength of an explorer, and as they tore at each other, the mountains cracked and rivers flowed backwards. Suddenly, a wretched figure walked out of the void, clutching his abdomen. He gritted his teeth and looked back with a furious gaze. Then a bolt of lightning flashed past and reduced the 2 beasts to dust. The lightning condensed in the void and transformed into Ku Lei, who looked down at the figure. "Where do you think you're going? This is the land of Spirit Void, and I can find you no matter where you go." The figure was Ku Wei, and he had been chased by Ku Lei for several days. He was in a sorry state and he was exhausted to the extreme. He had offended Ku Lei greatly in Progenitor Chen's tomb, and he had thought that he could follow Lu Yin after they left. However, Lu Yin had gone to undergo a test, and Ku Pu had stopped him from taking Ku Lei away. After returning to the land of Spirit Void, he had been targeted by Ku Lei. Not only had he been robbed of all his resources, but he hadn't even had the right to meet the family head, much less leave the land of Spirit Void. Ku Lei was playing a game with him, a game of cat and mouse. With a hiss, A bolt of lightning flashed and pierced Ku Wei's knee. Despite the intense pain, Ku Wei resisted the urge to kneel and glared fiercely at Ku Lei. Ku Lei sneered, "Go on, keep running. You don't want to kneel? I'll beat you until you kneel." A member of the Ku family is actually submitting to an outsider? Just the thought of it disgusts me. Ku Wei did not speak. His recent experiences had taught him that the more he spoke, the more he would suffer. Ku Lei snorted. "Where is the Yu family's heir?" Ku Wei lowered his head and remained silent. A few days ago, when Ku Lei had first asked this question, he had already known that he was done for. This question had not been asked by Ku Lei, but rather by the family head. It was only then that he realized why Ku Lei had been able to attack him so recklessly. It was no wonder that Ku Lei had only been toying with him and had not intended to kill him. The Ku family wanted to know the Yu family's whereabouts. Another bolt of lightning smashed Ku Wei into the ground, causing him to spit out a mouthful of blood as his flesh was lacerated. Ku Lei arrogantly said, "We'll stop here today. Let's see how long you can endure." He then turned into a bolt of lightning and left. Ku Wei looked at Ku Lei's departing figure with unwillingness, and he sank into despair. Ku Wei endured the pain as he cleaned his wounds. Not long after, a figure arrived and left after leaving behind a human terminal. Ku Wei stared blankly at the figure. "Thank you, brothers, for your support." Chapter 1205. On the other side, Lu Yin had left the Realm Mountain with Heizijwudi and was now sitting on the primordial Shiyu's back. Every time they passed by a large world, Invincible Sage would introduce it to Lu Yin, which made him envious. These great realms were all close to the Hall of Honor. Perhaps they would be protected, but at the same time, they could also pay a price to hire the experts of the Hall of Honor to stabilize their great realms. Why doesn't the Hall of Honor allow a large world to appear in the Innerverse and Outerverse? A greater world is too easy to destroy. Once an expert destroys a greater world, none of the people inside will be able to escape. The Hall of Honor won't even be able to stop them in time. Lu Yin understood that this was a barely acceptable explanation. At this moment his gadget rang. It was Ku Wei. He had almost forgotten about this qualified lackey. "Your Highness, you have to save me," Ku Wei's weak voice rang out. Lu Yin asked, "What's wrong?" Ku Wei recounted everything that had happened during this period of time and said bitterly, "Your Highness, I can't stay in the Ku family any longer. Ku Lei will kill me. Please take me away." The Ku family was one of the 7 courts, and they were not Lu Yin's subordinates. They would not be so easily bullied, and it would be difficult to take Ku Wei away. He looked at Xianxia. Xianxia had also heard their conversation. Heizijwudi shook his head. Everlasting Sky Island has never had any dealings with the 7 courts, and there is no enmity between them. It's not convenient for us to intervene. Ku Wei had helped him before, and he was also the captain of the Great Yu Empire's 10th Imperial Squadron. He was one of Lu Yin's people, and it would be embarrassing if he couldn't even save one of his own. However, this was still the 7 courts. Lu Yin would not look down on the various great powers just because he had overthrown the day-night flow zone. The 7 courts had dared to join forces against the Hall of Honor, which meant that they had their own strengths. Even if they were separated, each of them had their own superpower houses, which was not something that Lu Yin could interfere with. "Your Highness, I know it's difficult, but I beg of you, you have to take me away. If I stay here, I'll definitely die." Ku Wei grew anxious as Lu Yin's silence caused his heart to sink. Lu Yin was also thinking about how to take Ku Wei away. Ku Wei anxiously replied, "Your Highness, I'm your subordinate." Lu Yin replied, "Let me think about it. It's not that easy. You've just become a boundless advanced lockbreaker, so you can actually have a disciple." A lockbreaker's disciple. A thought flashed through Lu Yin's mind and he quickly said, "Thank you, Senior." He then turned to Ku Wei and asked, "Is there a problem with becoming my disciple? You can even be my grandson." Ku Wei shouted. Lu Yin was speechless. "I'll formally propose to the Lockbreaker Society that you, Ku Wei, become my disciple. As long as you agree to become a Lockbreaker disciple, everything will be fine." Ku Wei's eyes lit up. "Your Highness, you've become a boundless advanced Lockbreaker? Not bad." Ku Wei was delighted and he immediately opened the Lockbreaker network. Not long after, his status within the Lockbreaker Society had increased from 3 stars to Perceptive Intermediate, and he was now Lu Yin's disciple, a boundless advanced lockbreaker's disciple. Lu Yin immediately sent a request to the Lockbreaker Society to transfer Ku Wei to the Lockbreaker world to look after his planet. After doing this, Lu Yin put down his gadget. Whether or not Ku Wei could be saved would depend on the Lockbreaker Society, and Lu Yin wasn't too confident. After all, even if Ku Wei was his disciple, he was still a member of the Ku family, and the Lockbreaker Society couldn't interfere with family matters. Ku Wei also put down his gadget and resigned himself to fate. At the center of the Spirit Void continent, the Ku family's patriarch Ku Pu had his hands behind his back as Ku Lei stood in front of him. Whether it was in the mountain and sea realm or in progenitor Chen's tomb, your performance has disappointed the family, Ku Pu said in a low voice that was filled with dissatisfaction. Ku Lei was sullen, but there was nothing he could do. Ku Pu stared at him, but he didn't know what to say. According to past analyses, Ku Lei wasn't weak, but he had been born in this era. This was a brilliant era that had given birth to too many freakish geniuses, and it was easy for Ku Lei to be buried. Next up is the Supreme Tournament. If your strength doesn't increase by leaps and bounds, then break through to the Enlighter realm. At the very least, you can take a gamble and try to get into the top 10. Only the top 10 is worth anything, Ku Pu said. Ku Lei's gaze was resolute. I must find out where the Yu family is and learn the Yu secret art. With the combined strength of both the Ku and Yu families, I'll definitely be able to defeat everyone. Ku Pu secretly shook his head, as it was easier said than done to surpass the others. Just the three sons' ancestral chi alone was unrivaled, and one of the candidates had already been confirmed. The Mavis family, Sirius sect, and Burial Garden were all not to be trifled with. Furthermore, there was still the Astral Beast Domain technocracy and the Sixth Mainland. There were just too many experts. The Seven Courts' only hope was Xia Jiuyo from the Xia family. Once all 9 clones were fused together, the strength he displayed would give him a chance of entering the top 10. However, Ku Pu still hoped for a miracle. If you want to find the Yu family, then go find them yourself. Ku Lei was excited. Since his family no longer cared about Ku Wei's life, then that was good. He would definitely be able to find out where the Yu family was. At this moment, Ku Pu's gadget beeped. He glanced at it and his expression changed. He was furious. Preposterous. Ku Lei was puzzled. Ku Pu suppressed his anger and communicated with someone. Not long after, he helplessly looked at Ku Lei. Release Ku Wei and let him go. Ku Lei was shocked. Why? Ku Pu was irritated. I told you to release him, so release him. Don't do anything to him anymore. Let him go. He then left with a dark expression. As the Ku family's patriarch, he rarely felt so sullen. The Lockbreaker Society had used Ku Wei's status as a boundless advanced lockbreaker to summon him to the Lockbreaker world. With Ku Pu's status, he could have rejected the request, as the Lockbreaker Society could not suppress the 7 courts. However, the one who had spoken up this time was the Lockbreaker Society's president, Xiaoming. That person's existence was something that Ku Pu could not understand. When Ku Pu was still young, Xiaoming had been the Lockbreaker Society's president. Now Ku Pu was almost old, but Xiaoming was still alive and his appearance had not changed at all. There were not many people in the Neoverse who could make Ku Pu feel apprehensive, but Xiaoming was one of them. Since Xiaoming had spoken up for Lu Yin, Ku Pu had to give him face. Even the Ku family's elders had to give him face. Ku Pu could not understand how a junior had managed to get Xiaoming to speak up for him. Even Lu Yin himself had not thought that Xiaoming would speak up for him, let alone Ku Pu. On a continent above the ancient spirit sea in the Lockbreaker world, Xiaoming sat comfortably in a rocking chair. Not too far away, Elder Chan smiled. Are you doing this kid a favor? Xiaoming smiled. It's just a favor. If nothing goes wrong in the future, we'll have to rely on him. Elder Chan nodded. With that person around, nothing will go wrong. I hope so. Outside the Spirit Void continent, Ku Wei walked out in a sorry state. He looked back with hatred in his eyes. Ku family, just you wait. I'll be back. Lu Yin and Ku Wei had agreed to meet at Eternal Sky Island, and they did not have much to do for the rest of their journey. Half a month later, they left the Glory Realm. With the strength of an invincible saint, they tore through the void and brought Lu Yin across the Neoverse. They quickly arrived at Eternal Sky Island. At first, Lu Yin had not felt anything when he arrived at the Glory Realm, but now that he had left the glory realm he suddenly had a strange feeling. It was as if the glory realm was where he should be, and the universe was like rootless duckweed. Lu Yin did not tell Xing Wudi about this feeling, as he guessed that it might have something to do with the fact that humans had once been born on land. Land was the foundation of humanity. There were 6 continents in the universe and this was the 5th. He recalled what Xing Xinwei had said before. Cultivation was more successful on the soil of outer space, and the people from the 6th mainland had been able to imprint their power levels and suppress cultivators from the 5th mainland because the 6th mainland had not been destroyed. There was some kind of connection between the continents and humans. He arrived at Eternal Sky Island once more, and this time he saw the famous Heavenly Master Xianxia. On Eternal Sky Island, there was a skinny, shriveled old man not too far in front of Lu Yin. He was dressed in long gray robes and had an ordinary appearance, just like any other ordinary old man. This kind of person would not attract any attention as he walked on the streets. If not for Xing Wudi and Xing Xinwei standing there respectfully and Xing Wudi calling him master, Lu Yin would have thought that this was Xiao Bai's prank. Junior Lu Yin greets Heavenly Master Xianxia. Lu Yin bowed respectfully with a solemn expression. The Heavenly Master nodded and looked at Lu Yin with admiration. I've lived for so long that it's difficult to even record my history. I've seen too many geniuses in my time, but you're the first to reach the peak of your generation in a mere 12 years. Perhaps only progenitor Qin can compare to this kind of cultivation talent. Lu Yin hurriedly replied, Senior, you're too kind. I was just lucky. The Heavenly Master smiled. Luck is also a type of strength. Your physical strength, spiritual force, domain, and battle techniques are all at the pinnacle. There are very few people in your generation who can match you. Even the supposedly invincible 3 Yang ancestral qi would find it difficult to defeat you. Lu Yin was very excited to receive the Heavenly Master's acknowledgement. All along, the 3 Yang ancestral qi had been regarded as a truly invincible cultivation method. After the Prime Clear unleashed the true might of the 3 Yang ancestral qi, no one thought that he would be defeated. It was impossible. However, the Heavenly Master compared him to the 3 Yang ancestral qi, which was enough to show his admiration and admiration. Wudi, the Heavenly Master said. Xing Wudi bowed. Master. Contact the Hall of Honor. The Elysian Celestial Master of Everlasting Sky Island has recommended Lu Yin as the Pass Lord of Mount Supreme. He'll be in charge of this pass. Xing Wudi wasn't surprised. Yes, this disciple understands. Lu Yin was puzzled. Mount Supreme? Pass Lord? The Heavenly Master didn't give him an explanation. He waved his right hand, causing the air to transform into various images. Some took the form of tiny figures that displayed battle techniques with shocking power. Others turned into mysterious formations with unknown uses. Others formed images of foreign objects with unknown uses. Everlasting Island has 13 ultimate techniques. They are divided into 1 secret technique, 5 formations and 7 battle techniques. Take a look and see which one you'd like to learn, the Heavenly Master said. Chapter 1206. Lu Yin looked at the diagram in front of him and saw a small person surrounded by several smaller people, all of them using different battle techniques. Just as the battle techniques were about to hit the small person, they all turned into gas and swept past the small person. This is a secret technique from Eversky Island, called Ocean Return. It can turn an enemy's attack into raw energy, Xianxia Xinwei explained. It's a very powerful technique. Lu Yin was moved. Ocean Return sounded powerful, but he already had the Yu secret art, which could divert an enemy's attack. He also had the Plan secret art, which could allow him to avoid an enemy's attack. The effects of these 2 techniques overlapped. He looked to the side and saw a small person wielding a giant blade. Extremely domineering. That's a battle technique from Eversky Island Overlord / Junior brother Leon is proficient in this battle technique, and the power of that / isn't any weaker than the Xia family's 3 styles of blade intent. The more domineering a person is, the more they'll be able to display the technique's power. The main thing is domineering, Xianxia Xinwei continued to explain. Domineering? Domineering? He did, but it was different from Heizage Leon's straightforward domineering aura. Lu Yin's domineering aura was more obscure, but it was also more lawless. This battle technique clearly didn't suit him. After that he looked through all of the battle techniques on Long Sky Island, and his gaze landed on the 5 arrays. Could these be sourcebox arrays? 5 of them? What a joke. These are sourcebox arrays? Lu Yin guessed and looked at the Heavenly Master. The Heavenly Master smiled and nodded. I heard that you've become a boundless advanced lockbreaker, so it's time for you to comprehend sourcebox arrays. Only lockbreakers who can comprehend sourcebox arrays can truly be called lockbreakers. The universe is vast, and the most precious and hidden items are often difficult to approach. Lock breaking is a struggle against the universe, and the universe is not to be trifled with. Natural sourcebox arrays are even more terrifying. The Heavenly Master's words indicated that he wanted Lu Yin to choose sourcebox arrays. Lu Yin found it strange that the Heavenly Master had 5 sourcebox arrays. Wait, Heavenly Master, it can't be. He looked at the Heavenly Master in shock. Senior, you're an origin Heavenly Master? Lockbreakers were divided into discerning elementary, perceptive intermediate and boundless advanced. Above the boundless advanced were origin array masters, great origin array masters, and above them were boundary origin array masters. At the very top were heavenly origin array masters. Only lockbreakers who had mastered 5 or more sourcebox arrays and had created their own unique sourcebox array could be called a celestial array master. 5 sourcebox arrays were not easy to master. Xiu Shi had comprehended the Sirius Sex Greater Transfer Array, which was the lowest level of sourcebox arrays, and it might even have been modified. Even so, it would still take her a long time to reach a level where she could use it as she pleased. Even though Lu Yin had already grasped 2 sourcebox arrays, they were still the simplest ones. He had 5 pages of true insight, but he could only comprehend 1 origin opening array. If he wanted to comprehend another sourcebox array, it would take him several years to do so. And this was only after he had visited the Dao Source Sect's Primordial Enlightenment platform and read Gu Yu's letter. Even Xiu Shi would not be able to comprehend the origin opening array in such a short period of time, but she was already one of the most talented lockbreakers in the universe. She was on the same level as Wu Dan in the lockbreaker world, and she stood at the true peak of her generation. And this was just comprehending sourcebox arrays. If one wanted to become an origin heavenly master, they would have to create their own sourcebox arrays, which was completely different from comprehending. It was a pity that the sourcebox array in Gu Yu's letter was incomplete, or else he could have tried to comprehend it. He did not know if it was Gu Yu's doing or someone else's, but it was a pity. Of course my master is an origin heavenly master. Otherwise, why would everyone call him heavenly master, heavenly master? Idiot, Xianxia Shenwei grumbled. Lu Yin looked at heavenly master in shock. So this was the meaning of a heavenly master's name. From what he knew, the only person in the entire human domain who was the president of the Lockbreaker Society, Xiaoming, was an origin heavenly master. It was no wonder why there were 5 sourcebox arrays. Heavenly master turned around and glared at Xianxia Shenwei. You talk too much. Even though I've become an origin heavenly master, the disciples I've taught are all useless. Not a single one of them has reached the level of an origin heavenly master, and you still have the face to say that? Xianxia Shenwei laughed dryly, but he did not dare to say anything else. Heavenly master looked at Lu Yin and smiled again. Kid, although you are an in-name disciple of Everlasting Island, an in-name disciple is still a disciple. I suggest that you choose a sourcebox array to comprehend. Lu Yin bowed respectfully. Thank you for your kind intentions, senior, but this junior is already comprehending a sourcebox array. At the same time, I'm also trying to comprehend a second sourcebox array. Heavenly master was shocked. You actually have a sourcebox array? Lu Yin nodded as he was thinking about how to respond to Heavenly Master. Heavenly Master did not probe further. Forget it. Since you have a sourcebox array, it's fine as long as you comprehend it. So what do you want to choose? Secret techniques? Or battle techniques? Lu Yin looked up. Senior, can I only choose secret techniques or battle techniques? The Heavenly Master frowned. Little guy, are you not interested in my secret techniques? High Sage Shenwei and High Sage Wudi looked at Lu Yin, signaling him with their eyes. I've grasped the Yu secret arts and the Plan secret arts, which overlap with the effects of Myriad River's return. As for battle techniques, I've grasped too many, and I'm unable to learn any new ones. The combat techniques of the Long Sky Island were indeed not compatible with him. None of them were suitable for him even though they were all very powerful. The Elysian Heavenly Master looked at Lu Yin seriously and then thought of something. That's right. When you crossed the Bridge of Heaven, you indeed grasped many battle techniques such as the Sirius sect, the Ku family, the Day-Night clan, the overlaying stacks Dao and so on. With your innate gifts and secret techniques, it should be enough for you to use. Anything more would be meaningless. He then looked at Lu Yin. I promised Leon that if you returned safely, Everlasting Sky Island would compensate you. Lu Yin hurriedly replied, Junior understands that Senior has his own difficulties, and there's no need for any compensation. The Heavenly Master laughed. Since you've made a promise to your disciple, you can't go back on your word. Kid, you asked me what else I had but I couldn't think of anything. So what do you want? Lu Yin thought about it and then looked at the Heavenly Master. Does Senior have any life-saving treasures that I can use? Lu Yin currently lacked life-saving treasures that could deter extreme powerhouses. He had offended too many people, and now that the Outerverse had been gifted to the Sixth Mainland, there were many things that he needed to do. The Heavenly Master thought about it and then raised his hand, causing a palm-sized source box to appear. I do have some life-saving treasures, but they're too powerful and have too wide an area of effect. If you're not careful, you might even be trapped inside. This is a source box that I made myself and it contains an array called the Desolate Sky Array. Once it's used, a star system will become desolate. In terms of power, it should be enough to turn a cultivator with a power level of 800,000 into a dried corpse. Lu Yin's eyes widened. The walnut that Master Yuan had given him had been able to turn a powerhouse with a power level of 700,000 to ashes, but this source box could threaten a powerhouse with a power level of 800,000? And an area of effect attack. High Sage Shenwei asked, Master, isn't he forcing himself to use this? If he's not careful, he'll be finished. The Heavenly Master replied, with his abilities as a boundless advanced lockbreaker and the Aeon evolution scripture, he should be able to avoid being killed. Although the Desolate Sky Array is powerful, it's not that complicated. It's a pure offensive source box array. Lu Yin was delighted. Thank you, Senior. This junior will take this. He lacked such powerful external treasures, and it would be perfect if he asked Master Yuan for a few walnut source boxes when he returned to the Outerverse. Lu Yin carefully placed the Desolate Sky Array source box into his cosmic ring. You should be able to get into the top 10 of the Starry Sky Supreme competition. You have to rely on yourself to fight for opportunities. Remember, when you reach that place, don't fight if you can, but when you have to fight, don't be merciful. You have to fight for what you need. With that, the Heavenly Master left. Lu Yin did not understand what the Heavenly Master meant, and he looked at Xianxia Wudi. Xianxia Wudi shrugged. Just remember Master's words. You'll understand in the future. Xianxia Shenwei moved closer to Lu Yin and looked at him strangely. Kid, you really weren't controlled by the Neo-Human Alliance? We all thought that you were dead for sure, and even Master didn't think that you'd be able to return safely. Otherwise, he wouldn't have agreed to compensate you with junior brother Leon. Lu Yin replied, It's a narrow escape. Xianxia Shenwei looked at Lu Yin. You've cultivated death qi? Lu Yin nodded. Everyone knew about this, and if he really wanted to thank the person who had told Bulao about this, it would be Mu Tianluan of Despair. Lu Yin would remember this favor. Death qi is easily suppressed by the Spectre clan. Take care of yourself. I don't want to hear that you've joined the Neo-Human Alliance in the future. Lu Yin wanted to wait for Ku Wei at Eternal Sky Island. He had contacted Ku Wei once, but Ku Wei still needed a few more days. Out of boredom, Lu Yin wanted to take the bridge again to see what it would bring him. However, the results disappointed him as there was no reaction at all. Each person could only take the bridge once. Lu Yin had just walked past the bridge when he heard a strange laughter. Lu Yin pursed his lips. He had been wondering where the two girls had gone, but now they were here. Xiao Bai and Xiao He were even faster than they had been in the mountain and sea realm. They turned into black and white shadows in an attempt to scare Lu Yin. Lu Yin released his domain, and a large tree emerged from the ground and wrapped around the two girls' feet. The tree branches even formed the shape of a ghost's claw, which nearly scared the two girls to death. Lu Yin appeared. Xiao Bai and Xiao He's faces went pale and they glared at him. Little Lu, you're getting worse and worse. Little Lu, to think that we were worried about you. Lu Yin smiled. That's what you get for scaring me. Is it fun? Humph. Xiao Bai shook her head. Xiao Hei rolled her eyes. Lu Yin smiled and pressed the two girls down. Your speed has increased quite a bit. Have you been working hard on your cultivation? We want to participate in the Supreme Tournament, Xiao Bai said. Xiao Hei clenched her fists. We want to represent Eternal Sky Island. Lu Yin was amused. Although the two girls were young, they were not weak. It was a pity that the Supreme Tournament did not allow them to team up against their opponents. Otherwise, their combination would be enough to make hunters of their generation raise their eyebrows. After staying on Eternal Sky Island for a few days, Ku Wei finally arrived. When Ku Wei saw Lu Yin, he burst into tears. Your Highness, 7th Bro, Little Wei has been bullied. He rushed towards Lu Yin as he spoke. Chapter 1207. Lu Yin was helpless, and a gust of wind from his finger froze the man in place. He looked at him strangely. You were quite calm the first time I saw you, but you're getting more and more out of hand. Ku Wei exaggeratedly said, Xiao Wei is only like this when he sees Your Highness. Your Highness, you must uphold justice for me. Little Lu, this guy is really disgusting. Xiao Bai appeared and looked at Ku Wei with disgust. Ku Wei's eyes widened. How dare you speak to His Highness like that? Hurry up and apologize to His Highness. Xiao Bai mocked, lackey. There's no point in praising me. I only serve Your Highness, Ku Wei said proudly. Lu Yin was speechless. Xiao Bai was also speechless. Ku Wei was becoming more and more like a lackey. His only thought now was to cling onto Lu Yin's thigh and never let go. Even the Neo-Human Alliance could not do anything to Lu Yin, and with the power behind him and Ku Wei's own status, this thigh was just too thick. Ku Wei had already completely lost the glory of being a disciple of the Seven Courts Ku family. Rather than looking for trouble in the Ku family, he might as well come out and enjoy life. High Sage Xinwei had brought him here, and High Sage Xinwei had also brought him out of the Neoverse. Half a month later, Lu Yin arrived at the Innerverse First Flow Zone. This was the Sword Sect's territory. High Sage Xinwei returned to the Neoverse, and Lu Yin took out the Radiant-grade collapsible spacecraft. This spacecraft had been obtained from Hai Chi-Chi, and it had been stored in his cosmic ring all this time. He hadn't used the black hole-grade collapsible spacecraft that had been awarded to him by the Society. That was a personal spacecraft, and its range was even smaller, unlike this Radiant-grade spacecraft. Although it was also a personal spacecraft, it could fit 2 people. Your Highness, this is the Sword Sect's First Flow Zone. Back in the day, Your Highness defeated the 13 Swords multiple times. It's truly shocking, Ku Wei exclaimed as he had completely immersed himself in his role. First Flow Zone, Sword Sect. Lu Yin's heart skipped a beat. Do you know where the Sword Sect is? Ku Wei shook his head and said, You can just grab a random person to find out. Your Highness, are you going to the Sword Sect? Lu Yin nodded. He had arranged for Li Zimo to be sent to the Sword Sect, but he did not know how he was doing. Lu Yin was quite concerned about this genius in the way of the sword. Besides, as the master of the outer verse, the Sword Sect was under a lot of pressure from the inner verse. If possible, Lu Yin also wanted to experience the 13 swords. Suddenly, Ku Wei cried out in alarm. Your Highness, news about the Starry Sky Supreme competition has appeared. The screen was turned on and everything was dark. Then a tall mountain appeared in front of everyone's eyes. Numerous black figures appeared on the mountain, fighting with each other. Although it was just a projection, it made people's blood boil. Numerous black figures, numerous battle techniques, and endless attacks. All of them had only one goal, which was to reach the top. Finally, a figure reached the top. He raised his hand and pressed down. His hand covered the entire mountain. There were no words, only very simple video transmissions. Coupled with the music and the unfamiliar yet familiar battle techniques, Lu Yin was excited. He saw each and every one of those figures as Xianxia, as Ascension Mavis, as Lu Tianmu, as Wen Sanxi, as each and every one of those invincible experts that stood tall in the starry sky. Everyone's attention was focused on the peak. This was the Starry Sky Supreme competition. Although the top 10 was enough, there was only one peak in each mountain, there was no second place. Since there was a competition, how could they only compete for the top 10? Ku Wei clenched his fists. Your Highness, you will definitely be able to stand at the peak. This chapter is not finished, please turn the page. Lu Yin looked at the tall mountain on the screen, and then at the figure who was pressing down on everyone with a single hand. That was the pinnacle of the entire 5th mainland and 6th mainland's pinnacle. Only by reaching that position could one be considered truly invincible among their peers. During his time in the Innerverse, Lu Yin had asked Haizid Xinwei what a past master was, and Xinwei had explained that the Starry Sky Supreme competition would be held on Mount Supreme. There were 5 entrances to the mountain: east, west, south, north, and center. Only those who passed through the entrances could participate in the competition. This competition encompassed the entire 5th and 6th mainlands, and the number of participants was immeasurable. That was why this rule had been set. The entrances were known as passes, and 5 people from the same generation would be chosen to guard each pass. Only those who passed through the 5 passes could participate in the Starry Sky Supreme competition. The 5th mainland's human domain had 2 spots, the 6th mainland had 2 spots, and the Astral Beast domain had 1 spot. Lu Yin had been favored by the Heavenly Master and had been recommended to become one of the 5 pass masters. This was the highest stage of the 5th and 6th mainlands, and everyone wanted to participate. Everyone wanted to show their faces, and the 5 pass masters were undoubtedly the ones who received the most attention. To be able to become a pass master was equivalent to being recognized as one of the top 10 strongest without exception. In other words, once Lu Yin became one of the 5 pass masters, he would have to guard one of the entrances and prevent 1/5 of the entire universe from having the ambition to ascend to the highest stage. He would be their barrier, and at the same time he would be recognized as one of the strongest of the younger generation. When Lu Yin had first heard of this rule, he had immediately thought of the Astral Combat Tournament's 3 Astral Academies tournament. Although he had not been there at the time, he had watched the replay, and the 2 rules were very similar. This was the best method, as there were so many participants in the Starry Sky Supreme competition, and who knew how long it would take to compete one by one. Haizid Xinwei had told Lu Yin that the 5 pass masters would eliminate at least half of the participants. At Lu Yin's level of cultivation, numbers were meaningless, and he could not possibly fight to the death with every expert he encountered. Those who could last for 2 or even 3 breaths of time under his attacks could be completely ignored. The Pass Lord was only there to weed out the trash and also to tell everyone that these 5 were extremely strong. There were only 2 spots in the entire human domain, and the fact that the Heavenly Master had dared to recommend Lu Yin showed that he had a high opinion of him. Back when the Mountain and Sea Realm had competed for the 5 astral children, it had been equivalent to gathering the strongest powerhouses of the entire human domain's younger generation. Shangqing Lei Nu Yusab Yuhua Mavis Chiu Shi Xia Jiyo Wen Sansi Obscure and so on. These people were all enlighters, but aside from Shangqing, no one could be certain that they would be the next pass master. Lu Yin was not certain that he would be chosen, but it did not matter. Whether or not he was the pass master, he was confident that he would eventually become one of the top 10 powerhouses. "Your Highness, there's a spacecraft coming from the distance," Ku Wei said. Lu Yin looked up and saw that there were not many rune lines, and the strongest person on board was only a hunter. Of course, it would be different if they were hiding their strength. "Ask for directions." Ku Wei immediately left the spacecraft and stood in front of Lu Yin as a sword-shaped spacecraft drew closer and closer. Lu Yin was flabbergasted. Sword-shaped spacecraft? Didn't that belong to the Sword Sect? What a coincidence. The sword-shaped spacecraft acted as if it did not see Ku Wei, and it directly crashed into him. Ku Wei was unhappy and he raised a hand to attack. Although he was a cruiser, he was strong enough to challenge a hunter, and a single attack was enough to destroy the spacecraft. Inside the spacecraft was a man. "This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page." The man bellowed and charged forward, his sword piercing through the void. This was a hunter. Ku Wei snorted. He was humble in front of Lu Yin, but he was very arrogant in front of outsiders, and he had always referred to himself as Brother Wei. When he saw his opponent's sword stab towards him, Ku Wei raised a hand and tapped out with a finger. Finger tap. Finger tap was accompanied by the Ku family's Wither Zen technique, and it was enough to make an enemy's attack disappear. With a single strike, even the sword's edge was destroyed. Ku Wei's finger tap struck the tip of the sword, breaking it in half and sending it flying into the distance. The sword-wielding hunter finally regained his senses and he looked at Ku Wei in shock. "Who are you?" As a cultivator of the Sword Sect, he had been challenged by someone who was a realm breaker, and he had almost lost his grip on his sword. This was a great humiliation, but he did not continue to attack. If he could cultivate to the hunter realm, then his vision was naturally not simple. Ku Wei's finger tap had made him apprehensive, as this battle technique was definitely not ordinary. Judging from your posture, you're from the sword sect? Ku Wei asked. The man stared at Ku Wei warily, and then he looked at Lu Yin's spacecraft. His expression changed once again as he recognized the collapsible spacecraft and also saw the Sea King's Dome insignia. You're from the Sea King's Dome? Why are you stopping my sword sect from carrying out a mission? Ku Wei lazily replied, Brother Wei isn't stopping you. I just want to ask for directions. Where's the sword sect? The man looked at Ku Wei in bewilderment. Who are you? Why are you asking me where the sword sect is? Ku Wei grew impatient. I told you to speak, so speak. Why are you spouting so much nonsense? The man narrowed his eyes and stealthily tapped his gadget. At the same time he stared at Ku Wei warily as this guy did not seem like a good person. At that moment Lu Yin walked out of the spacecraft and looked at the man. He politely said, Please inform the sword sect that Lu Yin requests an audience. The man was stunned at first, but then he stared at Lu Yin in shock. You're Lu Yin? Lu Yin nodded. The man sized Lu Yin up again. Are you really Lu Yin? What? Do you have any doubts? Can't you feel the aura of an overlord and the demeanor of an invincible being? Ku Wei stood beside Lu Yin and shouted with his head held high. Lu Yin frowned. Ku Wei wasn't mocking him, was he? No matter how he heard it, he felt uncomfortable. The man hurriedly replied, Please wait a moment. I'll report this. He then immediately returned to the spacecraft. Ku Wei was unhappy. Your Highness, this guy is too blind. Even with your Highness's demeanor, he didn't recognize you immediately after arriving in the Innerverse. What a good-for-nothing. No wonder you're still a hunter despite your age. Lu Yin calmly replied, In the future don't talk about being an overlord or invincible. I'm not at that level yet. Also call me 7th bro. Ku Wei was delighted. 7th bro? Is Little Wei qualified? Your Highness, you're too good to me. Little Wei is willing to do his best for you until the day he dies. Lu Yin was speechless. He suddenly recalled that this guy was his own lockbreaker disciple. Lu Yin wanted him to call him master and then flatter him? Just thinking about it made him shudder. Not long after, the man came out and respectfully said to Lu Yin, Alliance Master Lu, this place is rather far from the sword sect. Elder Lu has invited you to the charming mountain flow zone, and will return to the sword sect together later to receive you. Lu Yin was puzzled. Charming mountain flow zone? The man nodded with a solemn expression. Our sword sect is currently waging a war against the charming mountain sect. Thank you, brothers, for your support. End. Chapter 1208. The charming mountain flow zone was located between the first flow zone and the day-night flow zone. It was a small flow zone, but that was only because it was about the same size as the Northline flow zone when compared to the first flow zone and the day-night flow zone. There was only one dominant power in the entire flow zone, and it was called the Charming Mountain Sect. The Charming Mountain flow zone's name also originated from the Charming Mountain Sect. The reason why the Charming Mountain flow zone had been destroyed was because it was located between the two major flow zones and produced a resource called Charming Mountain Grass, which had been fought over by the two major flow zones. Before this, the first flow zone had failed to seize control of the first flow zone, and the Charming Mountain flow zone had been given to the day-night flow zone. However, after the day-night flow zone had almost been destroyed by Lu Yin, the first flow zone had forcefully occupied the Charming Mountain flow zone. Lu Yin had never expected that he would be the source of this war. The day-night flow zone was the first flow zone, and it was one of the Innerverse 8 great flow zones. It covered a wide area and had great influence. Lu Yin had borrowed the power of Leon's armada and the entire Outerverse to almost destroy the day-night flow zone, which had caused an unimaginable shock to the Innerverse power structure. The day-night flow zone was tyrannical, and it had taken over many of the Innerverse resources. The various great powers were furious, but they did not dare to speak up. Now that they had been overthrown, the consequences would naturally be severe. The Charming Mountain flow zone was just one of the many that Lu Yin had not seen. This war was not fought between two sides but rather the power structure. The Innerverse was different from the Outerverse. It was crueler and more unreasonable. Lu Yin remained calm as he watched the battle in the distance. The Charming Mountain sect was much stronger than the Outerverse powers. Although they were not on the same level as the Taimo Temple, they still had several enlighters. Sword chi filled the sky and tore through the universe. Over 10,000 disciples from the sword sect attacked, and the sharp glints of their attacks caused others to shiver. 10,000 swords attacked together, and an enlighter from the charming mountain sect was torn apart. Ku Wei was speechless. Seventh bro, the sword sect is really ruthless. They don't even let anyone speak. Lu Yin calmly replied, since they've been destroyed, why should I speak? He had not said much when he had ordered the assassination of the Central Weave's allied forces. With a boom, the airwaves swept out in all directions. In the distance, several planets exploded, forming black holes. At the same time, a fleet of the Charming Mountain clan was directly ignited into flames. They were torn into countless pieces by the sword chi, and not even their bodies could be seen. My Charming Mountain sect is willing to surrender to the sword sect. Why is there no end to this slaughter? Sword sect, my Charming Mountain sect is willing to surrender. An enlighter shouted frantically, but a ray of sword chi pierced through his head. His eyes dimmed, and the despair in his eyes before his death was a stark contrast to the cold-blooded gazes of the sword sect's experts. The person who had killed the enlighter from the Enchanted Mountain sect was an expert from the sword sect dressed in blood-red robes. In Lu Yin's eyes, this person's rune line count was the second highest on the battlefield, as he had a power level of over 400,000. The person with the highest rune line count was an unremarkable thin man from the Enchanted Mountain sect. Perhaps the sword sect had not realized that this man was actually the strongest person on the battlefield. The thin man's opponent was only a hunter from the sword sect. No matter how exquisite the hunter's sword techniques were, they were all easily neutralized. The thin man's eyes turned cold when he saw that the Enchanted Mountain sect's elder had died, but the sword sect's battle had not ended. The sword sect has gone too far. He then grabbed the sword of the hunter from the sword sect and shattered it. The hunter from the sword sect watched in horror as he slapped out with his palm, causing the void to turn to dust. His terrifying power level swept across the battlefield, attracting the attention of many of the sword sect's experts. A wave of sword chi descended. The thin man snorted and casually waved his hand, dispersing all of the sword chi. At this moment, the sword sect expert dressed in blood-red robes appeared. You're not dead? Were the rumors from 100 years ago false? The thin man's eyes turned cold. What's the difference between truth and falsehood? Since I'm not dead, I hope that elderly can stop this battle. My Charming Mountain sect is willing to submit to the sword sect. The blood-red robed elderly sneered. If you knew that this day would come, then you wouldn't have acted in the first place. The thin man retorted, the reason you want to destroy my Charming Mountain sect is because when the day-night flow zone was in chaos, we had to provide reinforcements. Elderly, you should understand our position. We're stuck between the day-night clan and the sword sect, and it's difficult for us to survive. That's not a reason for you to sit on the fence. The Charming Mountain sect will definitely be destroyed today. This is an order personally given by the sect master. He doesn't want to see the words Charming Mountain Flow Zone appear on the star chart again. This flow zone needs a new master, Elderly said as he swung his sword. Sword chi with a power level of over 400,000 shook the heavens, and it spread far and wide. Perhaps half of the Charming Mountain flow zone was cut open. The thin man bellowed, if your sword sect destroys my Charming Mountain sect today, then you can destroy the other flow zones tomorrow. Aren't you afraid that the surrounding flow zones will join forces to resist? See, Elderly shouted. Within the spacecraft, Lu Yin watched the battle between the two. The entire battlefield was silent, and the shockwaves from each exchange swept across the heavens. He realized that he had overlooked something. Of the 8 great flow zones of the Innerverse, the Sword Sect and the Day-Night Clan were the most powerful. They had always been competing for first and second place, restricting each other. Now that Lu Yin had defeated the Day-Night Clan in one fell swoop and sealed off the entire clan, the Sword Sect had jumped out and become increasingly unrestrained. This was not a good thing. He glanced at the people from the Sword Sect not too far away. Perhaps they had brought him here so that he could witness this scene and use this opportunity to warn him that they were not plotting against the Outerverse. The unification of the Outerverse had infringed on the interests of the entire Innerverse. Currently, the Sword Sect was the largest faction in the Innerverse, which meant that the Sword Sect had suffered the greatest losses. Lu Yin's gaze turned cold as he thought about it. When 2 experts with power levels of over 400,000 clashed, it was the others who suffered. All of the sword sect's disciples had retreated, and the Charming Mountain sect had retreated as well, leaving the entire region of space for the two to battle. The shockwaves from their clash shook the heavens, and the spacecraft swayed like a lone boat. Many people found it difficult to breathe due to the star energy suppression, especially since Elder Li's sword chi was too sharp. Many were blinded just by looking at it. The person from the Charming Mountain sect had more rune lines than the sword sect's Elder Li, but Elder Li was still from the sword sect, and his power level could not be measured by mere numbers. It didn't take long for the man from the Charming Mountain sect to be suppressed and unable to hold on for much longer. Those from the sword sect were very confident in Elder Li and they calmly watched on. The Charming Mountain sect was in despair. Sword sect, you've gone too far. Even if my Charming Mountain sect is destroyed today, I'll drag you down with me. The thin man bellowed. It was unknown what he used, but it might have been an innate gift or a battle technique, but he actually managed to shatter Elder Li's sword chi. He then charged towards Elder Li like a ghost, his hand forming a strange shape that took the shape of a mountain before disappearing. Elder Li's eyes widened and he turned his sword around. Just as he was about to attack, a figure wearing universal armor appeared in front of him. The man raised his left hand and blocked the attack. The man from the Charming Mountain sect slammed into the armor, but he was unable to shake the newcomer. The newcomer raised his right hand and pressed it against the man's abdomen. There was a thump and a ferocious shockwave shook the surroundings, sending the man flying. The force was so strong that it tore through the void. Even Elder Li subconsciously took several steps back and looked at the newcomer in shock. Who could be so strong? He couldn't even react in time. If this person had attacked him, the consequences would have been unimaginable. The person who had attacked was naturally Lu Yin, but he wasn't helping Elder Li. The rune lines from the man from the Charming Mountain sect weren't enough to deal much damage to Elder Li. Since that was the case, he might as well do the sword sect a favor and let them feel his strength. If the sword sect wanted to use this battle to intimidate him, then he had to return the favor. Elder Li knew that the man from the Charming Mountain sect's attack wouldn't have much of an effect on him, but the sword sect didn't. This favor had been forced upon them by Lu Yin. I'm sorry, Elder Li. I couldn't hold back and attacked, Lu Yin apologized. Elder Li and Lu Yin exchanged glances. In the distance, the man from the Charming Mountain sect coughed up blood and stared at Lu Yin in shock. This person had actually ignored his attack and even made him cough up blood with a single palm strike. Lu Yin's universal armor had been upgraded 7 times, and its rune lines were close to 500,000 power levels. It naturally wasn't something that someone with a power level of 400,000 could break through. It had been a long time since Lu Yin had used an external item to challenge someone of a higher realm, and it felt great. Elder Li shifted his gaze to the man from the Charming Mountain sect, and the chill in his eyes turned into sword chi. He raised his hand and stabbed out with his sword, which pierced through the void. This attack surpassed all of his previous attacks, and from Lu Yin's perspective, it even carried the concept of the 13 swords, which reminded him of Lu Xiaoyan. Although she hadn't inherited the 13 swords, she had used various methods to get close to it. The man from the Mei Mountain sect spat out a mouthful of blood after being struck by Lu Yin's full strength. Lu Yin's current strength was enough to fight against a 3rd Transformation Corpse King, and even 400,000 Enlighters would not be able to compete with him in terms of strength. That palm strike had not been light, and the man was unable to dodge Elder Li's sword and was instantly killed. As he watched the man's corpse float in the air, Lu Yin was reminded of Northgate Taisui. Back then he had felt the terror of a powerhouse with a power level of 400,000. Now he could already pose a threat to such a person. Time passed so quickly. More than half of the 10 arbiters hadn't passed the age limit for the younger generation to reach 40, but they were probably very close to it. They were lucky to have made it to the Supreme Tournament. The death of the Charming Mountain sect's strongest powerhouse had led to the sect's destruction. Lu Yin had seen such scenes many times and he didn't feel much sympathy for the Charming Mountain sect. If not for the Sword sect, the Charming Mountain sect would definitely have supported the Day-Night clan, which would have caused trouble for his plans. It could only be said that this was their fate. He had experienced such desperate situations many times before, and this was the cruelty of the universe. You're Lu Yin. Elder Li looked at Lu Yin, his eyes filled with killing intent. He was a bloodthirsty person. Lu Yin nodded and deactivated his universal armor. Junior Lu Yin greets Senior. Elderly looked at Lu Yin, and then his gaze landed on his right hand. You're very strong. Even I can't compare to you. Lu Yin smiled. Elder's advantage lies in your swordsmanship. I only have a bit of strength, so how can I compare to Elder? You're the strongest when you reach the pinnacle, Elderly said before turning to leave. Chapter 1209. After Elderly left, an elder named Zhou Xian arrived. He was much more polite and had a good attitude towards Lu Yin. Alliance leader Lu, I've heard a lot about you. I'm Zhou Xian. Junior Lu Yin greets Elder Lu. I wouldn't dare. Alliance leader Lu is the master of the Outerverse and your status is much higher than mine. Zhou Xian smiled. Lu Yin humbly replied, Elder Lu, you're slapping me in the face. After all, I'm still a junior. The two exchanged a few more pleasantries, but the background was the destruction of the charming mountain sect. To them, the destruction of a sect and the deaths of countless people were all too normal. In the distance, a man looked at Lu Yin in astonishment, but he only glanced at him before charging towards the charming mountain sect. This man was Li Zimo, and he had participated in the battle to destroy the charming mountain sect. He was now a disciple of the sword sect. Lu Yin noticed him, but the two could not greet each other, so he pretended not to see him. He did not even observe Li Zimo in order to prevent the sword sect's people from noticing him. With Li Zimo's talent in the way of the sword, his status in the sword sect would definitely not be low. Lu Xian was a smooth and slick person and he spoke politely to Lu Yin while probing him. His words were full of flattery as if he wanted to elevate Lu Yin to the heavens. Lu Yin did not fall for this as Lu Xian's flattery paled in comparison to the Outerverse media. Even Ku Wei was better, at least he was shameless. Ku Wei stood behind Lu Yin and looked at Lu Xian with disdain. Lu Xian did not even know how to flatter, he was shameless. Lu Xian did his best to make Lu Yin feel the sword sect's goodwill, and Lu Yin did his best to make Lu Xian feel his goodwill. Not long after, the battle to destroy the charming mountain sect ended. Although the sword sect had killed many people, they had only been core members of the charming mountain sect. The rest had been captured for unknown reasons. Lu Xian, Elderly, and the others took Lu Yin to the sword sect. On the sword sect spacecraft, Lu Yin saw a familiar face. Long Yun. Back on planet Pyrolite, Lu Yin had used Long Yun to break through to 6-line battle force. This person had left a deep impression on Lu Yin. He was someone who was very good at hiding his strength. It's been almost 8 years, but things have changed. You've already become the master of the Outerverse, Long Yun sighed. Lu Yin smiled. You're about to break through to the Hunter realm. What about your battle force? He should have broken through to the 8th vein by now. Long Yun laughed. Isn't it a bit embarrassing to mention battle chi in front of you? Back then you used me to raise your battle force to 6-line battle force, while I had 7-line battle force. What about now? You're at the 9th vein level, but I'm only at the 8th vein level. I went from being 1 step ahead of you to being 1 step behind you. Lu Yin smiled. I heard that you've been titled the Cloud Marquis. Long Yun nodded. The 6th mainland invaded and I almost died. Me too, Lu Yin replied. Long Yun looked at Lu Yin. But you've also gotten your revenge. Night King Zhenwu was someone who stood above our generation, but you still managed to kill him. To be honest, I didn't quite believe it when I first heard the news, but I had no choice but to believe it. Lu Yin understood how important the 10 arbiters were to Long Yun and the others, as they were the 10 truly unrivaled individuals. Defeating Lan Si had shaken the Innerverse and Outerverse, and defeating Night King Zhenwu had caused an even greater commotion. Suddenly he really wanted to know what kind of expression Lu Tianmu, Long Yun, Lu Xiaoqiu and the others would have if he defeated them. Would Lu Xian still be able to smile? I'm looking forward to it. Who's the next 10 arbiters that you have to defeat? Right, you're already one of the 10 arbiters, so there's no need to go against them anymore. If you want to go against them, you should go against those from the Neoverse and those from the Supreme Tournament, Long Yun said. Lu Yin's eyes flashed. Speaking of the Supreme Tournament, how many people from the sword sect are participating? Long Yun shook his head. I don't know. There's no limit to the number of participants, so there should be quite a few. What about you? Will you participate? Lu Yin asked. Long Yun was helpless. I didn't want to at first, as it's impossible for me to reach the top 10. But those old fogies from the sect forced me to participate, so I had no choice. Lu Yin silently calculated. The sword sect had Lu Tianmu, Lu Xiaoqiu and Long Yun participating, and Lu Xiaoyun should be participating as well. This didn't even include the others, so he assumed that there would be 10 participants. The sword sect had 10 participants, and there would be quite a few other powers as well. The Neoverse would have even more participants, and those on the serious sects rankings would probably want to participate. There were also the 7 courts, and this was just the human domain. There would be many participants in the Supreme Tournament. I don't know why the Hall of Honor is holding this tournament. So many people are participating, and I heard that they'll think of ways to eliminate most of the participants. Since that's the case, why not just let the 10 arbiters in the Neoverse participate? Why drag everyone else into this? Long Yun grumbled, as he was someone who was very afraid of trouble. Lu Yin knew some inside information, but he could not tell Long Yun. A commotion could be heard in the distance, and Lu Yin and Long Yun looked over. Ku Wei had arrived, and he was gloating. 7th bro, there's an internal conflict in the sword sect. Lu Yin was curious, and he walked over. The sword sect was controlled by the Lu family, and all of the previous sect masters had the surname Lu. Thus, the Lu family was superior to the rest of the sword sect. Even though the surname Lu was a primeval surname, the Lu family was publicly recognized as the strongest primeval surname in the entire human domain. The Lu family controlled the sword sect, and they had naturally nurtured a group of Lu family members who were superior to the rest. They controlled a large amount of resources within the sword sect and bullied the ordinary disciples. Many of the sword sect's disciples were already used to this, but the newcomers were not. On the spacecraft, the Lu family members and some of the sword sect's disciples who relied on the Lu family members were together. Opposite them were the new disciples who had just joined the sword sect. Those who could join the sword sect all had extraordinary innate gifts and stood out from many other regions. Many of them had extraordinary backgrounds, and they were not afraid of the Lu family. Moreover, there were only a few direct descendants of the Lu family that were worth paying attention to, and the rest were all from the side branches. When Lu Yin, Long Yun and Ku Wei arrived, they saw dozens of people arguing on both sides. If we tell you to hand over your resources, then hand them over obediently. The Lu family has the final say in the sword sect, a man said arrogantly. Across from him was another man who was equally arrogant. If these words came from Lu Xiaoqiu, I wouldn't dare to refute them, but you? I'm not afraid of you. How dare you? The Lu family is one entity and you dare to resist? Why don't you ask what the disciples who joined the sword sect before you think? Some of them were just as arrogant as you, but they're all well behaved now. Those who practice the sword show off their abilities, but in the sword sect, it's best to be well behaved. Our surname is Lu. Behave yourself. So what? I don't believe that the sect will make things difficult for us new disciples just because of you. We won't make decisions for you either. Long Yun shrugged. Brother Lu, don't mind it. This kind of thing happens too often. The Lu family has some privileges in the sword sect. Lu Yin replied, the Lu family members that I've met aren't like this. Long Yun replied, the higher you climb, the more you know what you have to face. It's lonely at the top. These people at the bottom are arrogant, but they won't go overboard. Brother Long, did you encounter something like this when you joined the sword sect? Lu Yin was curious. Long Yun did not answer and only smiled. Not long after, Lu Xian arrived and berated both sides. The disciples of the Lu family were not afraid of Lu Xian as they were already used to it. Only the new disciples did not dare to make a sound and could only endure the humiliation. Lu Yin looked around and saw that Li Zimo was also behind the new disciples, but he was a bit further away and did not participate in the battle. Most of these new disciples were limiters and only a few were explorers. The situation of the Lu family was much better and they had a few more explorers. These people were fighting in the charming mountain sect, not in outer space. Just you wait. I'll teach you a lesson when we get back to the sect, one of the Lu family members sneered. Lu Xian glared at him. At that moment, a pretty girl from the Lu family spoke up. Elder, in the past when there were conflicts, you would let us send our own people to fight and the winner would have the final say. Why aren't you doing the same today? Lu Xian replied, we have guests today. Can't you see? Aren't you afraid of embarrassing yourself? Step down. Many people looked at Lu Yin and Ku Wei. Ku Wei was pleased with himself and looked down on the crowd. His gaze had angered the entire Dark Phoenix clan, and now that he was facing the sword sect, not only had his ability to provoke hatred not decreased, but it had even increased. Even Lu Xian was annoyed by his gaze. Ku Wei did not want to, but he had been born in the Neoverse, and this arrogance was difficult to change, even if he had left the Ku family. Elder Lu, it's fine. Since this junior sister wants to fight, I'd like to see the strength of the sword sex geniuses. The girl from the Lu family stared at Lu Yin and frowned. You look familiar. Long Yun scolded, don't be rude. This is the current Lu Ju. The crowd was confused and someone suddenly exclaimed, the Lu Yin who defeated Arbiter Zhenwu? The Outerverse's Great Eastern Alliance leader? Once one person recognized Lu Yin, the others all recognized him and they all looked on in disbelief. Regardless of whether it was the Lu family's disciples or the new disciples, they all looked at Lu Yin in shock as if they were looking at a legend. The pretty girl from the Lu family was shocked. You're the Lu Yin who defeated Brother Xiaoqiu? Lu Yin looked at her. You're Lu Xiaoqiu's sister? I'm his cousin. Lu Yin, I want to challenge you. The girl shouted. Shut up and step back. You're embarrassing yourself. Lu Shen barked. The girl stared at Lu Yin indignantly. Ku Wei smiled. Little girl, how about Brother Wei play with you? Lu Yin barked back. Shut up and step back. Ku Wei hurriedly stepped back. Lu Yin, accept my challenge if you dare. The girl shouted. Lu Yin was amused. This girl was just an explorer, but she wanted to challenge him. He glanced at the new disciples and pointed at them. Your opponent is over there. The girl was disdainful. This group is too weak. Lu Shen wanted to continue berating her. Lu Yin said, why don't I find you an opponent? If you can defeat him, then you can challenge me. The girl was delighted. Really? Who is it? That wretched guy behind you? Ku Wei was unhappy and he glared at the girl. Lu Yin was amused and he pointed at Li Zimo. Him. Everyone looked at Li Zimo. Li Zimo's expression was calm as he looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin was smiling, but no one could tell what he was thinking. Chapter 12:10. Lu Shen's eyes flashed as he looked at Li Zimo and then back at Lu Yin. He exclaimed, Alliance Leader Lu, you have good eyes. Lu Yin was surprised. What do you mean? Lu Shen smiled. This disciple is called Li Zimo. During the sword sex disciple recruitment test, he ranked first. At the same time, Elder Lianxin took him in as a disciple and personally taught him the Calm Heart sword. He's ranked at the very top of the sword sex 10 million disciples. Lu Yin suddenly understood. Looks like my luck is pretty good. The girl from the Lu family frowned when she saw that Lu Yin had chosen Li Zimo. Li Zimo was quite famous in the sword sect, and Elder Lianxin only had one disciple. When she had taken him in, he had caused a huge commotion in the sword sect. Li Zimo was very strong and it was rumored that he had even created his own sword technique. She was not confident in her chances, but since she had already spoken, she could only accept the challenge. Come, Li Zimo. The girl from the Lu family gripped her sword and stared at Li Zimo. Li Zimo did not move. She pointed her sword at him. Li Zimo, attack. Li Zimo looked up. My sword isn't for show. Lu Shen lowered his voice. Li Zimo, since Alliance Leader Lu has spoken, you should spar with Lu Ling, don't go overboard. Li Zimo frowned, stood up and opened his right hand. A long sword appeared and he pointed it at Lu Ling. Everyone else retreated. Lu Ling narrowed her eyes. I've always wanted to see what exactly you learned from Elder Lianxin, as well as your so-called self-created silent sword. As she spoke, the edge of her sword swung out with countless sword shadows. It was very similar to the myriad sword sect's 10,000 swords as one, but it was also different. The 10,000 swords as one focused on unity, and the final sword technique would be used to break through the void and unleash one's strongest sword technique. It was impossible to say which sword technique was better, as it only depended on who was using it. Lu Yin praised, what a great sword technique. Facing Lu Ling's countless sword shadows, Li Zimo slowly raised his sword and took a step forward. The sword fell and his body followed the sword. With a light bang, Lu Ling stood in place, stunned. The sword in her hand had shattered, and Li Zimo had appeared behind her at an unknown time. At this moment, Lu Yin felt like he was seeing Li Zimo, who had defeated Tang Si in the Reverend King's residence. Back then, Lu Yin had been stunned by Li Zimo's sword technique, and he had not been able to tell who was stronger between Li Zimo and Lu Xiaoqiu. But now Li Zimo's swordsmanship had improved even further, and he was still as straightforward as ever. His sword had left no trace behind. This was the silent sword, a technique that could rival the first sword of the 13 swords. Most of the people present had never seen the Sword of Silence before, and they were all stunned by it. Even Zhou Xian was shocked. He blurted out, "The first strike." Although the silent word sword was similar to the first sword of the 13 swords, it was different. The first sword slashed through the air while the silent word sword moved with the sword. Lu Ling could not believe it. She had been defeated by a single sword strike. As an elite of the Lu clan, she had been defeated by a single sword strike. Li Zimo glanced at Lu Yin and then coldly returned to his original position. He leaned against the wall as if nothing had happened. At this moment, no matter how arrogant the Lu family's disciples were, they all looked at Li Zimo with reverence. The strongest member of the sword sect's younger generation was undoubtedly Lu Tianmu, and after him were Long Yun, Lu Xiaoqiu and the others. Lu Xiaoqiu in particular had the aura of a latecomer. After all, he had inherited the 13 swords. However, Li Zimo's swordsmanship had left everyone speechless. This person might be able to challenge Lu Xiaoqiu. Clap, clap, clap. Lu Yin applauded and praised, as expected of the sword sect. Even a random disciple has amazing swordsmanship. He then looked at Zhou Xian. This disciple is called Li Zimo? Zhou Xian retracted his gaze from Li Zimo and looked at Lu Yin. That's right. He's the only disciple of our sect's elder Xianxia. Does Alliance Master Lu like him? Elder Xianxia? Lu Yin was puzzled. Zhou Xian explained, Elder Xianxia is an elder who is second only to the sect master. She's also an emissary. Lu Yin was shocked. So she's an emissary. No wonder she could train such an outstanding disciple. I'm impressed. Zhou Xian smiled and glanced at Li Zimo again. Lu Yin looked back at Li Zimo. I hope we can meet during the Supreme Tournament. That sword was very interesting. Li Zimo looked at Lu Yin and narrowed his eyes. Do you want to experience it? The atmosphere froze. Lu Xian immediately reprimanded, impudent. Alliance Master Lu is not someone you can challenge. He's one of the 10 arbiters and he defeated Lan Si, the Divine Fist, and Jin Wu of the 10 arbiters. He shone brilliantly in the Neoverse, and he's someone who has truly stepped onto the highest stage of humanity. If you want to challenge Alliance Master Lu, then you'll never be able to do so in this lifetime. Lu Yin's eyes flashed as this Lu Xian was trying to make enemies for him. Any normal person would not be convinced by such words, but this person was hiding a knife behind his smile. If you want to make a move against me, of course. I'll take it any time. Lu Yin smiled. Li Zimo gave Lu Yin a deep look before lowering his head and ignoring him. Lu Xian apologetically said to Lu Yin, Alliance Master Lu, I've failed to discipline him properly. When we return to the sword sect, I'll definitely report this to Elder Xianxia so that she can punish him. He then scanned the crowd. Why aren't you leaving? What are you still doing here? The sword sect disciples retreated one by one. Lu Ling stood there in a daze as she was pulled away by the other Lu family disciples. Before the disciples could leave, Elder Li appeared, dressed in blood-red robes. The sword sect disciples immediately bowed. Greetings, Elder Li. Greetings, Elder Li. Elder Li calmly looked at Lu Yin. Alliance Master Lu, you've seen my sword sect's juniors compete. Shouldn't you show them some of your skills? When they heard Elder Li's words, many of the sword sect disciples grew excited. It would not be easy for one of the 10 arbiters to take action. Li Zimo looked at Lu Yin. Lu Yin smiled. Elder Li, do you wish to have a spar with this junior? Elder Li's brows rose. You wish to spar with me? Lu Yin's lips curled up. I wouldn't dare to spar with you, but I'm just bragging. Of all the people here, who else besides Elder Li can force me to take action? Lu Ling and the other Lu family disciples were enraged. How arrogant. Long Yun was flabbergasted. This guy had become arrogant. Lu Xian had not expected Lu Yin to be so arrogant, even though he clearly seemed like an easygoing person. Elder Li exchanged glances with Lu Yin and then shook his head. If news of this battle spreads, others will laugh at me. He then looked at Long Yun. You go. Long Yun was stunned, but then he helplessly walked out. He was the only one present who could fight against Lu Yin, and he was also from the same generation. Although he would definitely lose, everyone knew that, and he did not know why Elder Li wanted Lu Yin to take action. Lu Yin did not know what Elder Li was thinking, but since he had been asked to take action, he did not mind. He would even dare to fight Elder Li. At worst, he would use external items, but he would not reveal all of his trump cards. His opponent was Long Yun, which meant that this would be a battle of battle force. At least that was what everyone else thought. The last time Lu Ying had fought Long Yun was on planet Pyrolite, and he had only been a Lemeter back then. It had been almost 8 years since then, and things had changed. When they met again, the one added disadvantage was not Lu Ying but Long Yun. Although Long Yun did not want to fight Lu Ying, he would not hesitate since he had to. "Brother Lu, use your full strength. I don't want you to go easy on me." Lu Yin's expression was solemn. "I won't go easy on you. This is a form of respect for you." "Thank you," Long Yun said solemnly, but then he thought for a moment. "You don't have to be so serious. I still want to participate in the Supreme Tournament." Lu Yin was amused. "All right." Many of the Sword Sect disciples were nervous, as Long Yun's meaning had been very clear. He was afraid. Among the Sword Sect disciples, Long Yun held a very high position. It could be said that among the younger generation he was second only to Lu Tianmu. Now he was afraid before the battle had even begun. This made everyone feel that Lu Yin was even more mysterious and even more reverent. Long Yun clenched his fists and blue lines gradually covered his entire body. At the same time, purplish-red lines appeared as well. This was 8-lined battle force, and his powerful aura shocked the crowd. Many of the Sword Sect disciples were excited and worshipped him. Battle force was not easy to cultivate, and it was not even easy to comprehend. Among the younger generation, those who could cultivate battle force to 8 lines could be counted on one hand. No one in the same generation in the Sword Sect had been able to do so, including Lu Tianmu. Long Yun was the only one. With 8-lined battle force, Long Yun's status was second only to Lu Tianmu. Even though Lu Xiaoqiu had comprehended the 13 swords and could easily challenge those in a higher realm, it was still very difficult for him to fight Long Yun. 8-lined battle force was the symbol of a powerhouse. On the other side, Lu Yin slowly exhaled as purplish-red lines appeared on the surface of his body. They did not cover his entire body and only wrapped around his fingertips. At the same time, red lines appeared as well. This was 9-lined battle force. When they saw Lu Yin's 9-lined battle force, many of the Sword Sect disciples paled and looked at him as if they were looking at a monster. 9-lined battle force. How had he cultivated it at such a young age? Even elderly could not figure it out, let alone them. Cultivating battle force was not that easy. It was normal for a normal person to not have 9-lined battle force for decades or even centuries, let alone a few years. The higher one's battle force went, the harder it was to improve. This was common knowledge, but Lu Yin had only used 8 years to go from 6-line battle force to 9-line battle force. This defied common sense. When Long Yun saw Lu Yin's 9-lined battle force wrap around his fingertips, he raised an eyebrow. "Brother Lu, 1 finger of battle force isn't enough, is it?" Lu Yin raised a finger. "It's enough." Long Yun's eyes narrowed. He had a good temper and was somewhat lazy. He did not like to fight, and he would admit defeat before a battle, but that did not mean that he did not have any dignity. It was too insulting to think that a single finger could deal with him. Elderly frowned. Defeating Long Yun with a single finger was a bit exaggerated even for the 10 arbiters. Unless Lu Yin's battle technique was a fingertip battle technique like the 13 swords. Although 1 sword was only 1 sword, it was enough. Long Yun nodded. "Since Brother Lu is so confident, I'll make my move." A sword suddenly appeared in his hand and he slashed out. It was a sword technique, single sword slash. It was a very ordinary slash, but it was extremely ferocious. It was different from the first sword of the 13 swords, which traversed the void. This slash did not seem fast, but it was filled with a domineering aura. Lu Yin was astonished. This slash felt different from the single sword slash that he had seen before, but there was no difference. As he thought about it, he tapped his foot and struck out with a finger. The single sword slash could change its trajectory, but Long Yun was infuriated by Lu Yin's provocation, and his sword pierced towards Lu Yin's finger. So what if Lu Yin had 9-line battle force? Lu Yin wanted to break through it, and his single sword slash continued forward. "Brothers, thank you for your support." "Thank you." Chapter 12:11. Pang. There was a loud sound followed by several soft sounds. It was the sound of metal falling to the ground. Everyone stared blankly at the arena. Long Yun stood sluggishly in his original spot. The long sword in his hand had been shattered and only the hilt remained. Fragments of the sword had fallen to the ground, and there were still remnants of his 8-lined battle force that had yet to dissipate. In front of him, there was a finger that was only millimeters away from his neck. The red-striped 9-line battle force was glaring and shocking. Lu Yin had used a single finger to shatter the sword slash and 8-line battle force. He then descended in front of Long Yun. As long as he took a single step forward, Long Yun would die on the spot. Long Yun's defeat was expected, but no one had expected that he would not even be able to withstand a single attack from Lu Yin. This was simply too ridiculous. Li Zimo's eyes lit up. Lu Yin was still the same Lu Yin, invincible and powerful. The disciples of the Lu clan were shocked and in disbelief. Lu Ling felt her scalp go numb, as this was the person she had wanted to challenge. Lu Yin was one of the 10 arbiters, and he was so powerful that he could not be surpassed. Would her senior sister be able to resist him? After all, he had defeated 2 of the 10 arbiters consecutively. Lu Xian gulped. Even though he was an enlighter, he still felt a chill run down his spine when faced with Lu Yin's finger attack. He could not withstand it. He did not want to admit it, but he had to admit that he could not withstand that finger attack. Elderly sighed in amazement and took a deep look at Lu Yin. As expected of 9-line battle force. Alliance Master Lu, I'm impressed. Lu Yin retracted his finger, and the battle force at his fingertips vanished. He smiled at Long Yun and then looked at Elderly. Thank you for your praise, senior. Elderly calmly replied, no wonder you wanted to ask me for advice. You have the right to do so. Lu Yin replied, senior, you flatter me. Once we reach the sword sect, take a good look around. With that, he turned around and left. Lu Yin looked at Elderly's back as he left. He had a nagging feeling that this elder was targeting him, and the sword sect's intimidation towards him made him feel that there was something going on here. Long Yun bitterly put away his sword hilt. Brother Lu, I admire you. It was just a finger. Lu Yin said to Long Yun, this is 9-line battle force. You'll be able to do the same once you level up. Long Yun was helpless. It's been 8 years and there's not even a shadow. It's very difficult. After saying that, he shook his head and left. The other sword sect disciples retreated after being berated by Lu Xian. Before Lu Ling left, she took a deep look at Lu Yin as if she wanted to carve his appearance into her mind. Lu Xian smiled at Lu Yin. As expected of Lu Ju, Alliance leader Lu's invincibility will probably shock an entire generation. Lu Yin smiled and said, Elder Lu, you're exaggerating. No matter how powerful I am, I can't block the 13 swords, especially the 13th sword. During the battle on the golden screen in the mountain and sea realm, he had personally witnessed Lu Tianmu unleash the 13th sword move. Truth be told, he still didn't know how to handle it, nor did he understand the principles behind it. Back then, Lei Yin's Great War's Thundersword Troops commander Lu Feng had said that the 13th sword couldn't be dodged and could only endure it. Lu Yin's praise of the 13 swords made Lu Xian feel very comfortable, and he beamed as he brought Lu Yin to his place of residence, waiting to return to the sword sect. The journey was dull and lonely. The first flow zone was huge, and with the speed of the warship, it would take several days to reach the sword sect's Sword Mountain. Ever since the previous incident, there had been no more conflicts on the spacecraft. It was as if everyone had been intimidated by Lu Yin's strength. Elder Li and Long Yun did not appear again. Even Elder Lu Xian only appeared occasionally to greet them. A few days later, the spacecraft arrived at the sword sect. Even though Lu Yin had seen the Sirius sect in the Realm Mountain before, he was still shocked when he saw the mountain peak in the distance that looked like the tip of a sword. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. This was the Sword Sect, the most powerful power in the Innerverse and Outerverse. It was the Sword Mountain that contained unparalleled sword techniques. From a distance, the Sword Mountain was enormous and it was surrounded by stars. It was filled with a sharp aura, but this was not just a feeling. It was real. The Sword Mountain was where the Sword Sect had been established, and it was a place of inheritance as well as a place of tempering. It was surrounded by an endless amount of sword qi that cascaded down like a waterfall. Anyone who wanted to enter or leave the Sword Mountain would have to endure the sword qi entering their body. Kuwei was shocked. 7th bro, the sword sect is too arrogant. Lu Yin felt the same way, as he wasn't afraid that the sword qi would go out of control and kill all of the sword sect's disciples. Suddenly, a trillion strands of sword qi soared from the top of the Sword Mountain and swept past the spacecraft, slashing into the distance. Lu Yin was shocked, as this wasn't just one person's sword qi, but rather the combined sword qi of many sword cultivators. It felt like the combined attack of countless disciples from the Temple of Taimo. But the difference was that this sword chi was much stronger than the Temple of Taimo's archery techniques. The sword chi had definitely contained more than 300,000 rune lines, and it was unknown how many disciples had combined their attacks. Lu Xian came over and apologized to Lu Yin. "I'm sorry, Alliance Leader Lu. We must have startled you." Ku Wei was unhappy. How could a few strands of sword chi startle our seventh bro? Even if there were a few times more sword chi or even a few dozen times more, our seventh bro would be able to disintegrate it with a single breath. Lu Yin barked, "Shut up." He suddenly felt as if Ku Wei had been possessed by a monkey. Lu Xian looked at Ku Wei with dissatisfaction and then said to Lu Yin, "Our sword sect's disciples practice their sword techniques every day, and they often attack together. I hope that Alliance Leader Lu will not take offense." Lu Yin smiled. As expected of the sword sect, it's truly amazing. Throughout the entire universe, no one can compare to the sword sect in terms of sword techniques. Lu Xian smiled. "We've arrived at Sword Mountain. Alliance Leader Lu, please make your preparations. The amount of sword chi that descends is related to one's cultivation, and everyone experiences different amounts of sword chi. Perhaps Alliance Leader Lu will be able to shock the entire sword sect." "What do you mean?" Lu Yin was curious. Lu Xian explained, "Sword Mountain's protective barrier is its own entity, which is the curtain of sword chi that falls down. The stronger a cultivator is, the more sword chi will be attracted to the barrier. For example, an enlighter will only be able to attract a small portion of the sword chi curtain, but elderly will be able to attract a much larger portion of it." Lu Yin's eyes flashed. "Then doesn't that mean that anyone's power level or strength will be determined by the curtain of sword chi?" Lu Xian replied, "That's not entirely true. I don't know what kind of power attracts the sword chi curtain. Generally speaking, people who practice the sword attract the most sword chi curtains. Alliance Master Lu has never practiced sword techniques, so you shouldn't attract too much sword chi curtains. However, you should still be able to attract far more sword chi curtains. With Alliance Master Lu's cultivation, you might be able to shake the entire sword sect." Lu Yin nodded and looked at the distant Sword Mountain with some anticipation. Soon after, the spacecraft landed and the group disembarked. "Alliance Leader Lu, please follow us into Sword Mountain," Lu Xian said. Lu Yin nodded. At that moment, another spacecraft landed nearby, and the first person to walk out was a familiar face, Lu Xiaoqiu. Lu Yin had not expected to meet Lu Xiaoqiu so soon. Lu Xiaoqiu seemed to have sensed Lu Yin's arrival as well, and the moment he disembarked, his eyes met Lu Yin's. He was shocked. "Why are you here?" Lu Yin replied, "I'm here to visit the sword sect. It's been a while." Lu Xiaoqiu looked at Lu Yin. "I see you often online." Other people disembarked from the spacecraft one after another. Aside from Lu Xiaoqiu, there were also two familiar faces, Lu Xiaoyun and Yanhua. Lu Xiaoyun. "This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page." She had not expected to see Lu Yin here. They were old acquaintances and had even been members of the Council of Astral Academy. "Brother Lu, long time no see," Lu Xiaoyun greeted. Lu Yin smiled. "Long time no see. Have you graduated?" "I graduated a long time ago. Only you guys are still hanging around and refusing to graduate." Lu Yin smiled. "I don't have time. All right, let's go. There will be plenty of opportunities to catch up in the future," an old man behind Lu Xiaoyun said coldly. He then glanced at Lu Yin with an indifferent gaze. Lu Xian gestured for him to enter. "Alliance Leader Lu, please." Lu Yin nodded. It was only when they reached the foot of Sword Mountain that they realized how spectacular it was. When they looked up, they could not see the peak at all. Boundless sword chi formed a waterfall that connected the heavens and the earth. One sword sect disciple after another charged into the sword chi. Some attracted dozens of sword chi into their bodies, while others attracted hundreds. Everyone had a different experience. Lu Xiaoqiu and the rest were not in a hurry to leave. Instead, they looked at Lu Yin, curious as to how much sword chi he could attract. Lu Yin was curious as well, and he turned around. "You guys aren't leaving?" "Brother Lu, please," Lu Xiaoyun said. Lu Yin pursed his lips. Above him, elderly charged into the sword chi, and the entire waterfall of sword chi suddenly split apart. From the bottom to the top, a large area of sword chi was attracted and rushed into elderly's body. It felt as if a mountain had split apart, and it was a spectacular sight. Elder Li quickly disappeared and many people looked at Lu Yin. Even Ku Wei was curious. Lu Yin stared at Ku Wei. You go first. Ku Wei felt wronged. Seventh bro, you should go first. Little Wei is your follower. If I tell you to go, then go. Lu Yin barked. Ku Wei had no choice but to charge into the sword mountain. Suddenly, a large amount of sword qi was absorbed into his body, followed by even more. Many sword sect disciples were shocked. How is that possible? That's the amount of sword qi that only enlighters can attract. Zhou Xian was shocked. He had never paid much attention to Ku Wei, but this person was actually so powerful. Even Lu Yin was shocked. Was Ku Wei really that powerful? He had surpassed an enlighter. What's there to be shocked about? Sword qi entering one's body doesn't just depend on one's strength. Perhaps this person has had some sort of fortuitous encounter. Sword cultivators should be wary of impatience. The person who caused such a ruckus just now should return to the mountain barefoot for a month. The elder who had led Lu Xiaoqiu and the rest shouted. Many sword sect disciples agreed. Lu Xian gestured for Lu Yin to enter again. Lu Yin could not refuse and he leapt into the sword mountain at a moderate speed. As the waterfall of sword qi drew closer and closer, Lu Yin could feel an endless amount of energy assaulting him. The closer he got, the more spectacular it felt, as if he was going against the heavens and earth. He quickly charged into the sword qi and then the waterfall above him split apart. Countless strands of sword qi entered his body and pierced his nerves, but they did not cause him much harm. He then charged into the sword mountain. Lu Yin had entered, but he did not know how much shock he had caused in the outside world. The amount of sword qi that he had attracted had surpassed Elder Li's, and the waterfall had split apart. Just as Lu Xian had said, it had shaken the entire sword sect and even the entire sword mountain. Lu Xian, Lu Xiaoqiu, Long Yun, and the rest gasped as they stared in disbelief at the slowly closing waterfall of sword qi. Thank you. Moving with the Wind Book 564938333 Brothers Tips. Thank you brothers for your support. I'll add more chapters, thank you. End of chapter. Chapter 12:12. How can there be so much? Who's that? Lu Yin, one of the 10 arbiters. Haven't you seen him before? He's Lu Yin? That's ridiculous. Even Elder Li didn't attract as much sword qi as he did. Did he split it apart? That's ridiculous. He's a freak. Elder Li's power level is over 400,000. Did Lu Yin surpass Elder Li? That's impossible. Even eldest senior sister can't do that. Long Yun felt bitter. Just how much was this Lu Yin hiding? Lu Xiaoqiu's eyes flickered, and his desire to challenge Lu Yin was instantly crushed. Lu Xian felt bitter. Was Lu Yin still a youth? Even the elder who had reprimanded the disciples was shocked, speechless. Even though they knew that the amount of sword qi attracted was not solely related to one's strength definitely accounted for more than half of it. Lu Yin had actually attracted so much sword qi. They did not believe that he had surpassed Elder Li, but how? They all had a feeling that this person was cheating. Elsewhere, Lu Yin entered Sword Mountain. As soon as he landed, he felt a sharp pain in his foot. He jumped in fright and looked at the ground. This is Sword Mountain. Sword qi is always present, be it on the ground, in the houses, or even in the food. Sword qi can appear anywhere, so there's no need to be surprised, a middle-aged man explained with a smile. Lu Yin nodded. Thank you for your explanation, senior. The middle-aged man hurriedly replied, Alliance leader Lu is too polite. I'm just here to receive the mountain, so there's no need for you to be so courteous. Senior is too humble, Lu Yin replied. This middle-aged man was an enlighter. Ku Wei walked over to Lu Yin's side and complained, Seventh bro, this place isn't suitable for people to stay in. Sword qi can appear anywhere. Ku Wei had a strange expression on his face as he moved closer. Do you think that sword qi will appear when they're doing that? Lu Yin glared at him. Don't be rude. The middle-aged man only smiled and did not reprimand Ku Wei. Soon Lu Xian and the rest entered Sword Mountain. Their eyes were still filled with shock, but they did not say anything. Alliance leader Lu, I'll bring you to meet the sect leader. He's been waiting for some time, Lu Xian said. Lu Yin nodded with a solemn expression. The Sword Sect master was a truly important figure in the innerverse and outerverse. Even though directors like the old man were said to stand at the peak of humanity, that was only on the surface. Those people still needed to have someone supporting them from behind. For example, Night King Jing was backed by the Day-Night clan. Of the 9 directors, one of them was from the Sword Sect, and that director had to take orders from the Sword Sect's sect master. Of the 9 directors of the Hall of Honor, 2 were from the Innerverse, the Sword Sect and the Day-Night clan. This was one of the reasons why these 2 powers were the most powerful in the Innerverse. The Sword Sect's sect master was one of the existences that stood at the pinnacle of humanity. Of course, it wasn't just cultivation but also status. The current Sword Sect master's name was Lu Qianjue. Not only was he the current Sword Sect master, but he was also the Sword Sect master from 2 generations ago. He was an existence whose battle prowess could not be estimated. The Lu Qiyu that Lu Yin had seen in Ironblood Weave was the previous sect master of the Sword Sect. He was a transitional figure and was also known as the disgrace of the Sword Sect's Lu family. It could be said that the recent history of the Sword Sect was inseparable from the sect master Lu Qianjue. He was the one who had single-handedly controlled the Sword Sect. On the way to the Sword Sect, Lu Yin began to imagine what would happen. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. He had met the Sword Sect's sect master many times before, and he had always wondered what sort of identity he should use to converse with him. In his mind, the 2 of them would either meet in the Sword Sect's conference hall, a place that was specially used to entertain outsiders, or in a cultivation area. He had never expected that they would meet in a pond. From time to time, sword chi would rise from the ground and pierce into the soles of his feet. The air around him would also be invaded by sword chi from time to time. The sword chi was mainly used for killing, and it was completely incompatible with the tranquil pond. However, Lu Yin had been brought here by an old man who was fishing in front of him. When Lu Yin arrived, the old man had just caught a lively fish. It had a strange appearance and had legs, but it was very exquisite. It's a fish from Gone Planet. You've caught it so far away. This kind of fish doesn't taste good. The old man casually tossed the fish back into the pond and continued fishing. There was no one else around. Lu Yin approached the old man step by step until he was a few meters away. It wasn't that he didn't want to move forward but rather that he couldn't. The sword chi around the old man was unimaginably terrifying, and if he tried to force his way through he might end up being decapitated. Junior Lu Yin greets Senior. The old man turned around and looked at Lu Yin. He had a kind face, and the moment he turned around, all of the sword chi around him disappeared. He patted the grass beside him and said, "Come, let's sit down and talk." Lu Yin nodded and casually sat down next to the old man. After experiencing so many things, Lu Yin could even deal with the Hall of Honor's Zen Elder, let alone the Sword Sect's sect master. Juniors only needed to be respectful in front of seniors, and there was no need for them to be afraid. The old man kept looking at Lu Yin with a smile on his face. Lu Yin sat down. "Alliance Master Lu, I've heard a lot about you," the old man said in a gentle tone. Lu Yin smiled and said, "I've also heard a lot about the Sword Sect's sect master. It's my honor to meet you today." "Oh, what fame. You're just an old man." The old man laughed. He was the Sword Sect's sect master Lu Qianjue. Lu Yin praised, "The Sword Sect is the strongest sect in the Innerverse and Outerverse, the king of the sword. Even in the Neoverse, no one dares to say that their swordsmanship surpasses the Sword Sect's. When the Sixth Mainland invaded, I heard about their reverence and admiration for the Sword Sect's swordsmanship. The Sword Sect's name is like an eternal lighthouse in the river of time that will always be seen by others." The old man shook his head. "Forget about the Sword Sect. Even the behemoths in the Neoverse are nothing more than ripples in the river of time. No one can be a lighthouse, and the Day-Night clan is the best example." Lu Yin looked at the pond in amazement. "Senior, did you just say that the fish you caught came from Gone Planet?" Lu Qianjue replied, "That's right. This pond connects to all of the mountains and rivers in the first flow zone. I like to fish." Lu Yin was amazed. Fishing the entire flow zone was quite bold, and it also showed the Sword Sect's control over the first flow zone. This was a deterrent. "How did you do it, Senior? I like to fish as well. When I go back I can build a pond that connects to the entire Outerverse." Lu Qianjue looked at Lu Yin with a strange glint in his eyes. "Those people should be punished severely." Lu Yin was puzzled. "I saw your battle with Xiaoqiu during the Astral Combat Tournament. At that time I ordered my subordinates to try and recruit you, but unfortunately they failed." Lu Yin suddenly recalled that after the Astral Combat Tournament, Old Kai had told him that the sword sect had tried to recruit him. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. However, the sword sect had offered him the status of the sect leader's personal disciple, which would have given him the same status as Lu Xiaoqiu. At that time, Lu Yin had rejected the sword sect's offer, as with his abilities he would not have been able to develop well even if he had joined the sword sect. There were countless geniuses in the innerverse and outerverse, and Lu Yin did not walk the path of the sword. It was not worth it for him to join the sword sect for the sake of status. Furthermore, he had been confident that the sword sect would try to recruit him again in the future, but too many things had happened after that and he had forgotten all about it. He no longer had the same enthusiasm for the sword sect, but he had never expected that the sect leader would still remember him. The sect leader's direct disciple was Lu Qinjue, the disciple of this old man in front of him. Lu Yin had almost become this old man's disciple. If you had succeeded back then, you would have been my disciple and my sword sect would have gained another genius. What a pity. Lu Qinjue sighed as he truly felt that it was a pity. Even though the sword sect specialized in swordsmanship, there were also experts who cultivated other battle techniques. Lu Yin smiled bitterly. It's my bad luck. Actually, with Lu Yin's current strength, Lu Qinjue still had the qualifications to recruit him as a direct disciple. However, Lu Qinjue did not do so. Lu Yin's glory was known throughout the universe and he had even gone to the Neoverse. Alliance Master Lu, what do you think of my sword sect? Lu Qinjue asked as he looked at the pond. The water was very calm. Lu Yin replied, I just said that you're like a lighthouse in the river of time, a king of the sword. Lu Qinjue shook his head. Empty exaggerations are useless. My sword sect indeed has some achievements in the way of the sword and we also control the first flow zone. In the innerverse and outerverse aside from the Day-Night clan we were invincible. Now that the Day-Night clan has gone silent, my sword sect is number 1. Does Alliance Master Lu admit this? Lu Yin solemnly replied, of course. My sword sect has millions of disciples, and when they unleash their sword chi, they can sweep through the universe and are unparalleled. Does Alliance Master Lu admit this? Of course. My sword sect has been passed down for countless years and we have a deep foundation. Our influence is extensive, and the 13 swords is an invincible sword technique that can instantly destroy an entire region. Does Alliance Master Lu admit this? I still admit it. Since that's the case, I'll give you a piece of advice. Lu Qinjue looked seriously at the water. Dissolve the Great Eastern Alliance. From Lu Qinjue's first question, Lu Yin had already guessed what he was going to say. Lu Qinjue had brought Lu Yin to watch the destruction of the Charming Mountain sect, to the sparring between the disciples, and then to the sect master's personal intervention. All of these were threats, and Lu Qinjue's ultimate goal was to get Lu Yin to dissolve the Great Eastern Alliance. The Great Eastern Alliance's existence threatened the innerverse interests. The innerverse had always been above the outerverse and there were many flow zones within it. Which one of them had not benefited from the outerverse? This was especially true for the 8 great flow zones. Of these 8 flow zones, the Sword Sect, Day-Night Clan, Wen Family and other powers had benefited the most from the outerverse, and the Great Eastern Alliance's existence was the greatest threat to their interests. Ever since the innerverse and outerverse had been connected, and the Blaze Realm had failed to take action, some people had said that the Sword Sect and Day-Night Clan would act sooner or later. However, Lu Yin had been the first to topple the Day-Night Clan, and now, it was the Sword Sect's turn. The Sword Sect and the Day-Night Clan were considered giants in the innerverse, and they both restricted each other. It would have been fine if the Day-Night Clan had not gone silent, but now that they had, the Sword Sect had become increasingly arrogant. Their first target was the Great Eastern Alliance. If I hadn't returned and the Great Eastern Alliance had continued to be supervised by Old Man Bu, what would the Sword Sect have done? Lu Yin asked, his words filled with provocation. Lu Qinjue smiled, not minding Lu Yin's attitude. Same. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. Would you have gone against a director of the Hall of Honor? End of chapter. Chapter 12-13. Lu Qinjue looked at Lu Yin with an amused expression. Resist? What do you mean resist? That old man thinks too highly of himself. He's actually not that important. Even if we use a director to balance out the directors, there are still 2 in the outerverse. Even if he's just a figurehead, the innerverse power isn't something that a single director can suppress. We didn't act back then because the time wasn't right. Is the time now? Lu Yin countered. Lu Qinjue shook his head. Regardless of whether the time is right or not, the Great Eastern Alliance must collapse. Alliance Master Lu, do you know how much damage the Great Eastern Alliance has caused to the Innerverse since its establishment? Ignoring the other powers for now, my sword sect has already lost millions of star essence. Lu Yin frowned. Senior, did your calculations begin when the Innerverse and Outerverse were separated? It began when the Innerverse and Outerverse were reconnected. Lu Yin fell silent. Cultivation is a long process and 1 year isn't much. However, it's normal for any sect to exist for tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands, millions of years or even longer. You can calculate how much they've lost. Senior, that's not how you calculate things. These resources aren't your surplus. Otherwise, after so many years, Sword Mountain wouldn't be able to bear the benefits of the Outerverse alone. The Outerverse doesn't have that many resources for you to enjoy. That's right. Even so, it's still a significant loss, and that's just the star essence. If you include the various resources and talents that were used for exploration, the losses are immeasurable. The Great Eastern Alliance cannot bear such a loss. Lu Yin looked at the calm surface of the pond. Senior, have you ever considered that if you catch a fish here, some planet will have one less fish? Lu Qinjue was amused. So what? Do I need to think about them? That's right. Senior, you don't need to think about those ants because they can't resist. Even if Senior fishes away their only food and casually discards it, they still can't resist. Lu Yin sighed and then stood up. Then has Senior ever considered whether I'm one of those ants? Is there any way to resist? Lu Qinjue put down his fishing rod. The incident with Old Man Bu proved that you, Lu Yin, are no ordinary person. Even in the Hall of Honor, you have people supporting you and you have Master Yuanshi and Everlasting Island behind you. Otherwise, you wouldn't have been able to topple the day-night flow zone. You're not an ant and I don't treat you as a junior, which is why I've said so much to you. However, everyone has a bottom line and the Innerverse is the same. Lu Yin's gaze was calm. What a coincidence. This is also my bottom line. Lu Qinjue sighed. Very few people are able to see the big picture clearly, and that includes a director like the old man. You know that the Outerverse Alliance can unleash a huge amount of power, and you can even resist the Day-Night Clan. But have you ever thought about what kind of power the Innerverse Alliance will unleash if the Innerverse Alliance is formed? Lu Yin's gaze turned cold and he bowed to Lu Qinjue. This junior will take his leave. He then turned to leave. Lu Qinjue didn't look back and continued fishing calmly. It wasn't until Lu Yin was completely gone that a person in blood-red robes walked out from behind him. It was Elderly. Sect Master, how should we deal with this? Elderly asked coldly. Lu Qinjue was helpless. There's an important figure behind this kid, and it's not as simple as Everlasting Island. Don't do anything to him. Promise the Blaze Realm that they'll make the decision. We'll agree to that plan. As Sect Master. Have Xiaoqiu show him around Sword Mountain. Yes. Lu Qinjue then nodded. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. He continued fishing calmly. Elsewhere, Lu Yin was led by a sword sect disciple to a pavilion. There was a waterfall nearby and a sword sect disciple was cultivating beneath it, enduring the heavy pressure of the waterfall and the onslaught of sword qi. The disciple was only a melder, but his gaze was resolute and persistent. Anyone who could join the sword sect was an elite and any one of them would be the strongest on Earth. When he thought of Earth, Lu Yin was reminded of Jupiter. When he had the time he would definitely take a look at what was on that planet. The Outerverse was probably not going to be peaceful anymore, and Lu Qinjue's attitude indicated that the sword sect was going to make a move against the Outerverse. The Great Eastern Alliance was too enviable, and it was either coveted and wanted to be taken away or destroyed. Lu Yin felt that it was better for the Innerverse and Outerverse to be separated. 7th Bro. Ku Wei arrived from a distance and carefully looked around the pavilion. He then whispered to Lu Yin like a thief, 7th Bro, guess who I saw at Sword Mountain? Who? Lu Yin was puzzled. I don't know him. Lu Yin's gaze turned unfriendly. Are you messing with me? Ku Wei hurriedly replied, no 7th Bro, listen to me. I don't know that person but I've seen him before. He participated in the Great Eastern Alliance's first Alliance Conference, which was held on Xenu Star. It was the conference that elected you as the Alliance leader. Lu Yin was shocked. Someone from the Great Eastern Alliance? Are you sure? I'm absolutely sure. That guy has too much personality and he's too ugly. I've never seen someone that ugly in my life. Perhaps his race is just like that. He's even uglier than Kaze, who was your gatekeeper, Kuwei said. Lu Yin fell into deep thought. Someone from the Great Eastern Alliance had actually appeared at Sword Mountain. That meant that someone from the Alliance had already defected to the Innerverse. He was not surprised, as the Great Eastern Alliance had only been established because of his threats. Back then, young Master Tian had been able to easily rope in a group of people. The Innerverse's prestige in the Outerverse had been established for many years, and a single word from him could easily rope in a group of people. The Great Eastern Alliance had not been stable to begin with, and the only reason it had not been disbanded was because of Lu Yin's methods and the information that he had used to threaten others. Of course, there was also the threat of Aegis and Leon's armada. But no matter what, the Great Eastern Alliance was very easily divided. Lu Qinjue had said so much to Lu Yin today, and it seemed that he had not been trying to persuade Lu Yin to disband the Great Eastern Alliance. Rather, he had been warning Lu Yin not to interfere and to be wary of the people behind Lu Yin. To the Great Eastern Alliance, it did not matter whether Lu Yin was present or not, as the alliance could break apart at any time. Were they not worried about the Hall of Honor? The fact that the old man had been able to supervise the Great Eastern Alliance through the 9 directors meant that the Hall of Honor had tacitly approved of the Great Eastern Alliance's existence. Lu Yin's expression turned solemn, and he recalled Lu Qinjue's words about how much power the Innerverse could unleash if they joined forces. Of the 9 directors of the Hall of Honor, 2 were from the Innerverse. Although the Innerverse could not compare to the Neoverse, the power that it contained was not something that the Neoverse could ignore. If the Innerverse truly disbanded the Great Eastern Alliance, then the Hall of Honor would not be able to interfere. This was somewhat troublesome. As he thought about it, Lu Yin turned around to look for Lu Qinjue again, hoping to obtain more useful information. However, when he returned, he did not find Lu Qinjue. Instead, he met with Elder Li. The sect master wants to rest. Alliance Master Lu, please come again next time. Elder Li's attitude towards Lu Yin was very cold. Lu Yin knew that Lu Qinjue did not intend to continue the discussion with him. Xiaoqiu will be here soon. When he arrives, I'll have him show Alliance Master Lu around Sword Mountain, Elder Li said. Lu Yin felt helpless and he looked into the distance. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Lu Yin could see the old man fishing with his back facing Lu Yin. He had a benevolent expression and his methods might be very overbearing. Elder Li, please tell the sect master that I, Lu Yin, am able to suppress the old man, and not just because of Eternal Sky Island, Lu Yin said. Elder Li's gaze turned sharp. Are you threatening the sword sect? Lu Yin's tone was gloomy. A gambler who has lost everything isn't afraid of anything. If I can topple the day-night flow zone, then I can topple the first flow zone as well. Elder Li's eyes narrowed and they were filled with killing intent. Lu Yin was not afraid as compared to the Day-Night clan, the sword sect was more rational. Furthermore, Night King Zhenwu's hatred for Lu Yin ran too deep. No matter what kind of background Lu Yin had, the only outcome would be a fight to the death. However, the sword sect was different. They would not offend Master Yuan and Eternal Sky Island just to kill Lu Yin. Besides, Lu Yin was not that easy to deal with. Elder Li's position in the sword sect was special. Although he did not manage the sect's affairs, he was in charge of war. When the sword sect was at war, Elder Li was the #1 killer. Elder Li's thoughts were very simple. Anyone who threatened the sword sect would be killed without mercy. He really wanted to destroy Lu Yin here and now. Lu Yin met the elder's gaze without fear. Elder Li's expression suddenly changed as if he had heard something. The killing intent in his eyes vanished. Alliance Master Lu, you should be aware that the various great powers of the Innerverse have their own interests in the Outerverse, especially the 8 great flow zones. For example, the Day-Night clan controls no less than 10 weaves, and those 10 weaves can only exchange benefits with the Day-Night clan. For example, the Blaze Realm exchanges benefits with places like the Dark Mist Weave. Lu Yin was puzzled as he did not know why Elder Li was bringing this up. The Innerverse and Outerverse have been separated, and they had no choice but to join the Great Eastern Alliance. The Innerverse cannot say anything about that, but since the Innerverse and Outerverse are connected, these people are still in the Great Eastern Alliance. To the Innerverse, this is considered a betrayal. They are our doorway to the outerverse, and since they've betrayed us, we need to clean them up. Lu Yin's eyes went wide. The Innerverse wants to kill the upper echelons of the Great Eastern Alliance? The upper echelons who are unwilling to leave the Great Eastern Alliance and are unwilling to work with the Innerverse again. The name list has already been confirmed, and it's 409 people. Lu Yin clenched his fists. This was a threat, and it was an obvious one. 409 people were the upper echelons of the various weaves of the Outerverse. These people were all willing to stay in the Great Eastern Alliance, and the number of upper echelons in the Great Eastern Alliance far exceeded this number. This meant that the rest of them had already reached an agreement with the Innerverse. I'm only telling Alliance Master Lu this because I want to clarify a problem. The Great Eastern Alliance's collapse is inevitable. Forget the Great Eastern Alliance, even the Hall of Honor can't stop it. We can even hand over the list of names to Alliance Master Lu. Alliance Master Lu, do you have that many experts protecting you? Even if you do, what about the rest? They all want to leave the Great Eastern Alliance, so can you force them to abdicate? Elderly asked calmly. The executors of the Great Eastern Alliance's plan are the entire Innerverse, mainly the 8 Great Flow Zones. How many people can you deal with? The plan has already begun, and there are only a few days left until the execution date. How can you stop it? Why are you telling me this now? Lu Yin asked. Elderly replied, the Sword Sect does not wish to become mortal enemies with Alliance Master Lu, so we're only informing you of the Innerverse bottom line. You've violated this bottom line. Of course, the name list does not include the Great Yu Empire or the people you value. Thus, to Alliance Master Lu, aside from the collapse of the Great Eastern Alliance, there are no other losses. This is the Sword Sect's goodwill. Lu Yin found this funny. It was clearly a threat, but it was also goodwill. End of chapter. Chapter 12-14. Lu Yin had long since known that the Innerverse would not allow the Great Eastern Alliance to continue existing, but he had not made a move all this time because he had been confirming the list of names. His thoughts were in a mess. 409 people represented the strength of the Innerverse, and the assassins were all experts. Lu Yin did not have that many experts to deal with. Even if he added in Leon's armada, the Sea King's Dome, the Lon family and the Day-Night clan's Day King bloodline, he would not be able to gather enough people to protect 409 people. Even if he did, it would be useless. If the Innerverse could assassinate someone once, then they could assassinate someone twice. The portal plan was not a top-secret plan, and it was an open threat. Compared to the assassination, it brought more fear to the people who were targeted. They were afraid that they would change sides and choose to withdraw from the Great Eastern Alliance, which he could not stop. No one wanted to live under a butcher's knife. This portal plan could easily disintegrate the Great Eastern Alliance. It was no wonder why Lu Qianjue had said that it would be useless even if the Headless Elder took over the Great Eastern Alliance. Unless the Hall of Honor intervened and suppressed the Innerverse. How dare you threaten Alliance Master Lu like this? Are you tired of living in the Sword Sect? Your broken swords are rusty, aren't they? Do you know that even the 7 courts would have to bow before our Alliance Master Lu, let alone a mere Sword Sect? Do you know? Ku Wei threatened without restraint. Elderly completely ignored him and similarly ignored Lu Yin. He had only been ordered to inform Lu Yin of the portal plan. This was the Sword Sect's goodwill. They were apprehensive about the power behind Lu Yin, and they did not want to have a falling out with him. Alliance Master Lu, the sect head wants me to tell you that if you wish, you can become friends with the Sword Sect at any time. If you need any help, you can contact the Sword Sect directly. You should know that the Sword Sect is fated with you, Elderly said. Lu Yin looked into the distance. Fated? This should be referring to Madame Naylan. Her name was Lu Fuxue, and she was from the Sword Sect's Lu family. She had helped Lu Yin a lot. In 12 years, Lu Yin had gone from an ant-like cultivator to where he was today. Even the Sword Sect's sect head had taken the initiative to show goodwill. It had only taken him 12 years, which was something to be proud of. However, Lu Yin could not feel happy as he was still being threatened. Ku Wei spouted lotus flowers beside Lu Yin as he brazenly threatened Elderly. At this moment, Lu Xiaoqiu arrived and gave Ku Wei a strange look. Brother Lu, the sect master asked me to show you around Sword Mountain. Lu Yin nodded and did not say anything else to Elderly. He then left with Ku Wei and Lu Xiaoqiu. Elderly's gaze turned cold as he watched Lu Yin's departing figure. Based on his personality, he would have directly killed this brat. Even though the Great Yu Empire had not been affected by the sect master's plan, this brat would still have resentment in his heart, which would be detrimental to the sword sect in the future. However, the sect leader had his own concerns. The leader of the sword sect, Lu Qinjue, was fishing calmly, but he felt uncomfortable in his heart. It had been many years since he had experienced this feeling. How could he describe it? For fear of breaking the vases. That's right, for fear of breaking the vases. He was actually afraid of a child. Lu Qinjue smiled and sighed. The times have really changed. The appearance of the 10 arbiters represented the future, but this child is already ahead of the 10 arbiters and represents the current situation. Children these days are incredible. Sword Mountain was famous throughout the universe. It was surrounded by stars, and this was a common sight. As he walked along Sword Mountain, he was still thinking about his plan. Lu Xiaoqiu didn't say anything and just walked in front. He was debating whether or not to challenge Lu Yin and feel the difference between them. Lu Yin wondered if he should contact Wang Wen to discuss how to deal with the portal, but he decided against it. Wang Wen, on the other hand, was not finished. Wei Rong and Xianxia were both very smart, but when faced with the Innerverse general situation, their courage was lacking. They had the courage to resist the Innerverse, but their horizons could not exceed the Innerverse. Lu Yin was different. With the sword sect's attitude towards him, the things that he could do and the things that he could think of far surpassed theirs. Lu Yin suddenly thought of Huaging. If he drank some Huaging tea, he would definitely become smarter and be able to think of a solution more easily. It wasn't that he hadn't thought of asking Eternal Sky Island or Leon's Armada, but this was the general situation of the entire Innerverse. Eternal Sky Island could threaten the sword sect, but it could not threaten the entire Innerverse. The various powers of the Innerverse hated each other deeply, but their attitudes towards the Great Eastern Alliance were surprisingly united, which made it very difficult for Lu Yin to deal with them. "Brother Lu, where's Muju? Why don't I see him?" Lu Yin was puzzled. Lu Xiaoqiu answered, "He's in seclusion." "Is he preparing for the upcoming Supreme Tournament?" Lu Yin asked. Lu Xiaoqiu nodded. "Brother Lu, I have a question, but I'm not sure if it's convenient for me to ask." Lu Yin hesitated. Lu Xiaoqiu looked at him. "Go ahead." Lu Yin was curious. "How old is Muju?" Lu Xiaoqiu was stumped and he thought for a moment. "Almost 40. Almost 40. Lu Yin was puzzled. Lu Xiaoqiu nodded. "Very close. Actually, the 10 arbiters aren't that far apart in age and they're only about 10 years older than us. Their innate talent, resources, and opportunities created the 10 arbiters. If we were born 10 years earlier, we might not be any worse than them." At this point, Lu Xiaoqiu realized something. Although the person in front of him was about the same age as him, he was still one of the 10 arbiters. What was even more depressing was that this person had consecutively defeated 2 of the 10 arbiters. When he thought about this, Lu Xiaoqiu immediately lost interest in challenging Lu Yin. He tried to compare the results of challenging Lu Tianmu, but after some thought he concluded that Lu Yin would be in a similar situation as Lu Tianmu. "Brother Lu, you're the true genius here," Lu Xiaoqiu finally blurted out. Ku Wei was delighted. "Of course my 7th bro is a genius. You don't know this, but in the Neoverse he single-handedly fought against so many geniuses. He was invincible in Progenitor Chen's great tomb." Lu Yin interrupted Ku Wei and looked into the distance. There sword chi soared into the sky, filled with a sharp intent. Each sword chi resonated with the others, forming a strange battle technique. Lu Yin had seen similar battle techniques before. This was a combination battle technique, and it could also be called a battle techniques array. This should be a sword array. The combination battle technique formed a sword array that doubled the power of the array. Lu Yin, Lu Xiaoqiu, and Ku Wei arrived at a mountain peak not too far away from the sword chi and looked down. There were more than 100 sword sect disciples in the huge plaza, and they were all practicing their sword techniques together. Each person was moving in a different direction, and the direction of their sword chi was different. When combined together, they formed a powerful sword array. Every time they slashed out, the 100 people would roar and the sound waves would distort the void. These sword sect disciples were only limiters, but Lu Yin felt that their combined sword array was enough to threaten a cruiser. What a powerful combination sword technique. As expected of the sword sect, the individual sword techniques have the invincible 13 swords, and the combination sword techniques are even more exquisite, Lu Yin praised. Ku Wei was shocked. I never thought that the sword sect would have such a sword array. I've only seen similar combination battle techniques in the Neoverse, and I don't think there are any in the Outerverse. There are. The Temple of Taimo has a combination archery technique, but it's not as powerful and requires more people to use it. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Lu Yin asked. Lu Xiaoqiu replied, the power of a sword array depends on the strength of the people who set it up as well as how familiar they are with it. My sword sect has 100-person sword array, and the people who set it up are all cruisers. However, they have the power to threaten an enlighter. Lu Yin's heart skipped a beat. Where can I see it? Or should I say that I can't see it? Lu Xiaoqiu replied, anyone can see it. The sword array requires a clear mind and it has its own training method. Even if an outsider sees it, they won't be able to learn it. He then led Lu Yin in a different direction. Not long after, they arrived at the foot of another mountain peak. There was a plaza in front of them that was more than 10 times larger than the previous one, and there were more than 100 sword sect disciples sitting cross-legged in it. Lu Yin was shocked as they were all cruisers. This was the sword sect's foundation. Back in the Great Yu Empire, the captains of the 13 imperial squadrons had only been cruisers, but here they were just ordinary disciples, even if they were slightly older. The sword sect's elite disciples were cruisers, and they could challenge ordinary hunters. Although they might not necessarily win, they still had a chance of winning. This was the sword sect's strength. With more than 100 cruiser realm disciples working together, it was not impossible for them to challenge an enlighter with the help of the sword array. There was a giant stone slab outside the plaza with a sentence carved onto it. Hunters who succeed in challenging a sword array may make a request. Lu Yin was puzzled. Brother Lu, what does this mean? Lu Xiaoqiu replied, this is a rule of my sword sect that has been passed down since ancient times. Any hunter who succeeds in challenging a sword array may meet the sect master and make a request that is not excessive. Lu Yin's eyes lit up. Has anyone succeeded? Lu Xiaoqiu nodded. Yes, eldest senior sister succeeded. Even Night King Zhenwu and Wen Sanxi succeeded. Lu Yin's eyes flickered as he looked at the plaza. Lu Xiaoqiu glanced at him. It seems that Brother Lu is interested. Lu Yin smiled, raised a hand and patted Ku Wei's shoulder. Go and try. Ku Wei was stunned and did not react in time. Lu Yin grabbed him by the shoulder and tossed him into the plaza. Ku Wei was startled as he was met with a majestic and sharp sword qi. He howled and dodged the sword qi as his body flickered. Behind him, above him, in all directions and even under his feet, sword qi attacked him. This was a combination of sword qi, and it was no ordinary sword qi. Even with Ku Wei's strength as a member of the Seven Courts Ku family, which was enough for him to challenge those in a higher realm, and he was also a 3 stars perceptive intermediate lockbreaker, he still felt a chill run down his spine. He barely managed to dodge the sword qi and his scalp was almost sliced off. Within the sword array, Ku Wei had no time to react as the endless sword qi pressed down on him like the sky. He dodged several times, but his arms and thighs were pierced by the sword qi and blood flowed out. He was furious. Brother Wei will fight it out with you. He tapped out with a finger to meet the sword qi in front of him. The sword qi suddenly changed directions and disappeared into nothingness. This was the power of finger tap, and it could calm an enemy's mind and make them lose their desire to fight. Finger tap had succeeded, but Ku Wei was not facing just one person. Instead, he was facing over 100 elite cruisers from the sword sect. The sword qi in front of him disappeared, but the sword qi behind him, above him and under his feet surged forth. Ku Wei's face went pale. Seventh bro, save me. Lu Yin's figure flickered as he appeared beside Ku Wei. Facing the sword qi around him, Lu Yin raised a hand and flicked his finger. With a bang, an enormous force shattered the swords and Lu Yin pushed Ku Wei away. At the same time, the sword qi on both sides of Lu Yin joined together and cut through the void to envelop Ku Wei. End of chapter. Chapter 12-15. Lu Yin leaned to the side and easily dodged the attack. His speed was not something that Ku Wei could compare to, and even though the sword qi had sealed the void, he still had a way to avoid it. At the same time, he looked at the expressions of the sword sect disciples, who were all expressionless and numb. Outside the plaza, Elderly appeared, followed by one sword sect expert after another. They all watched as Lu Yin charged through the sword array. Who is this person? He's brave enough to charge through the sword array as a hunter. He's Arbiter Lu Yin. What? He's Lu Yin? No wonder he can definitely charge through. This person defeated Arbiter Zhenwu and the Divine Fist. It was 10 years ago that Arbiter Zhenwu attempted the sword array, and he was far weaker than this Lu Yin back then. It looks like he's doing it with ease. The sword array can't trap him. Anyone could tell that the sword array was ineffective against Lu Yin. The only reason he had not broken through the array was because he wanted to experience it for himself. Lu Xiaoqiu clenched his right fist. The difference between them was indeed great. At that moment, an old man charged into the plaza and swapped places with a sword sect disciple. The old man was a hunter, and his addition caused the sword array's power to increase slightly. Lu Yin was puzzled as the sword array required a clear state of mind. Even if this old man was a hunter, if he could not coordinate with the other disciples, then not only would he not be able to increase the array's power, but he might even weaken it. Why was he able to increase it now? Lu Yin looked at the old man who stabbed out with his sword. Dozens of strands of sword qi merged into the old man's body, transforming into a terrifying sword qi with a power level of over 200,000 that shot towards Lu Yin. Lu Yin smiled and raised his hand as well. He flicked his finger and this single move easily dispelled the sword qi. He then reached out with his other hand and casually tapped the old man's body, sending him flying away under the old man's shocked gaze. Behind him, dozens of swords sliced through the air. Lu Yin disappeared and soared into the air. He waved his right hand and a powerful gale transformed into an unparalleled force that forced the dozens of disciples back, causing them to cough up blood. Lu Yin's current power level could not be measured by a measly power level of 200,000. Even an enlighter with a power level of 300,000 would not be his opponent. Xia Jiu, Yuhua, Qiushi and the others were all enlighters, but they could not defeat a single corpse ghost. Lu Yin, on the other hand, could face it head-on. This was the difference between them. The sword formation posed no threat to him. Another hunter from the sword sect replaced a disciple and joined the sword array. Soon after, the hunters were replaced one after another, but the result remained the same. Lu Yin had not used any battle techniques, battle force, spiritual force, or domains. He had relied solely on his physical strength and speed to render the sword array helpless. Ku Wei cheered, "Seventh brother is mighty. Seventh brother is invincible." The sword array was an important part of the sword sect. Someone challenging the sword array was enough to attract the attention of countless sword sect disciples. More and more sword faction disciples came to watch, and there were more than 10,000 of them. Lu Xin, Lu Ling, Yanhua, Long Yun, Li Zimo and the others were all present. Even the sword sect master Lu Qinjue, who was fishing, was looking at the pond. The scene of Lu Yin's fierce battle with the sword formation was playing on the surface of the pond. With a bang, another sword shattered. In the distance, Elderly glanced at Lu Shen. Lu Shen nodded. He rushed into the sword formation and took the place of a disciple. Lu Shen was always smiling, but from Lu Yin's point of view he was hiding a dagger behind his smile. However, this person's strength was not weak as he was an enlighter. Now that a true enlighter had joined the sword array, the entire formation immediately changed. The many spectating sword sect disciples fell silent. Lu Yin was only a hunter, and sending an enlighter to deal with him was already considered bullying. Now Lu Yin had actually joined the sword array. Even if Lu Yin won, it would still be considered a loss. Ku Wei was furious. "Your sword sect is too shameless. Seventh brother, let's not fight anymore. Let's expose them and get people to curse them to death." Lu Xiaoqiu helplessly shook his head, but he did not say anything. In front of Lu Yin, Lu Shen stabbed out with his sword, which was also accompanied by dozens of strands of sword qi. This was a sword array, and his attack was not something that someone with a power level of 200,000 could deal with. Definitely surpassed 300,000. Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. "Elder Lu, you've gone too far." "Forgive me, Alliance Master Lu," Lu Shen smiled, but his movements were not slow. His sword slashed through the void. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. "Forgive me as well." He did not seem to move at all, but Lu Shen's sword was shattered. Lu Shen's entire body, along with the dozens of sword sect disciples around him, was sent flying while coughing up blood. Lu Yin lightly tapped his feet, and more than 700 stars revolved around his body. There was a loud explosion as the stars exploded. Serious palm. Over 100 people from the sword array coughed up blood and collapsed to the ground, as they could not withstand a single serious palm. Only Lu Yin remained standing in the plaza looking down at the crowd. All of the sword sect disciples around him were silent as they stared blankly. Victory and defeat had been decided in the blink of an eye. This was serious palm. The serious sect had been able to stand tall in the Neoverse and become a true behemoth for a reason. Serious Art's range was the bane of sword arrays. Not only did it ignore speed but it could also attack in a large area. Lu Xian's sword had shattered and there was blood at the corner of his mouth. He stared at Lu Yin in shock as he had just felt an incomparably ferocious and invisible attack. Could it have been Arbiter Lan Si's emptiness palm? This person had fought against Night King Zhenwu, and he had relied on the emptiness palm to completely suppress his opponent. This was the emptiness palm and its power was unparalleled. Elder Li's eyes were filled with dread, and he suddenly recalled that Lu Yin had wanted to ask him for guidance on something. This kid was unfathomable. No one understood the strength of sword arrays better than the sword sect disciples. Naturally, the shock that Lu Yin had caused was something that they would never forget. Lu Ling stared at Lu Yin in disbelief as he stood alone in the plaza. That invincible aura of his caused her entire body to tremble. This person was truly tyrannical. Lu Yin looked around before finally looking at Lu Xian. "Excuse me, Elder Lu." Lu Xian smiled bitterly as he stood up and shook his head. He looked at his broken sword and sighed. "Thank you for showing mercy, Alliance Leader Lu." Lu Yin smiled and walked out of the plaza. He looked up at Elder Li. "The rules of the Sword Array Challenge state that you can request an audience with the sect master, right?" Many people looked at Elder Li. Elder Li was silent for a long time before he nodded. "Come with me." Lu Yin smiled. "Thank you." At the same pond, Lu Qinjue quietly fished and Lu Yin walked up behind him. "Alliance Leader Lu, I've already said what I needed to say. There's no point in meeting again, so why bother?" Lu Qinjue asked indifferently. His fishing rod moved and he was delighted. He abruptly lifted it up, causing a giant strange fish to rush out of the water. The strange fish was extremely ferocious, and it let out a shriek that distorted the void. This strange fish had at least the power level of a hunter. Lu Qinjue laughed. "Naughty." He didn't seem to move at all, but the strange fish was torn to shreds. Its blood and organs vanished and only its flesh was left behind. "If you hadn't resisted, you could have returned alive. What a pity." Lu Qinjue sighed before continuing to fish. Lu Yin looked at Lu Qinjue's back. "Senior, will the portal plan be carried out?" Lu Qinjue replied. The sword sect was not the one who created the portal plan, but rather the entire Innerverse. There's no need to ask. Lu Yin's gaze turned cold. "Can I make a request now?" "If your request is for the sword sect to withdraw from the portal plan, then you don't have to say it." Lu Yin's tone sank. "Of course not. I'm not that stupid. Even if the sword sect doesn't participate in the portal plan, the other flow zone's powers can do the same." Lu Qinjue was curious. "Then what request do you have?" Lu Yin looked up. "I would like to meet with the masters of the 8 great flow zones as a senior." Lu Qinjue stood up and looked at Lu Yin with a solemn expression. "You want to talk to them?" Lu Yin nodded. Lu Qinjue was amused. "You can't even convince me, so how are you going to convince them?" "It's better than doing nothing." Lu Yin shrugged. Lu Qinjue looked at Lu Yin and recalled all of Lu Yin's past deeds. Although this kid was young, he was decisive and he was also very calm. Since he had proposed a meeting, did he really have a solution? "Senior, are you not even willing to agree to such a small request?" Lu Yin asked. Lu Qinjue nodded. "But I'll agree. I'll contact them right away and see if you have the ability to convince them. You should know that the Great Eastern Alliance's existence has caused them great losses. You won't be able to compensate them." Lu Yin smiled. He wasn't sure, but he still had to try. The Innerverse was dominated by the 8 great flow zones, and only the Wen family of the Erudite flow zone, the Beast Tamers flow zone's Divine Grade Hull, the First flow zone's Sword Sect, the Day-Night clan's Day-Night flow zone, the Gu flow zone's Divine Gu Dynasty, the Spirit Seal flow zone's Lingling clan, and the Chaos flow zone's Chaos God Mountain. As for the Blazing Mist flow zone, it had the Blaze Realm, the Sylvan Dragon clan, and the Ross Empire. The Day-Night flow zone also had the Phoenix family, But they were only China to the day-night flow zone and could not influence the entire flow zone. The Spirit Seal flow zone also had the Dire Barbarian clan and the Soul Dream tribe, but the Lingling clan was the absolute ruler. This time, Lu Yin had met someone who was qualified enough for Lu Qianjue to extend an invitation. The surface of the pond was calm and the fishing rod was laid flat. A gentle breeze blew through the pond, making it seem very peaceful. Lu Yin stood beside Lu Qianjue as a screen of light rose up in front of them, revealing a ball of flames. Following that, a man walked out of the flames. Even though it was just an image, Lu Yin could still feel the scorching heat of the flames. "Senior Lu, may I know why you're looking for me?" The man had a coarse appearance and well-built muscles. His skin was red and had flame-like stripes. His gaze was sharp and even his pupils seemed to be burning with flames. A single glance from him seemed to be able to burn the heavens. He was the master of the Blaze Realm, Lord Red. "We'll talk about it when everyone's here," Lu Qianjue replied. Although the Blaze Realm was split into 3 parts of the Blazing Mist flow zone and could be considered a powerful force in the Innerverse and Outerverse, they were still lacking in comparison to Lu Qianjue. If not for the Blaze Realm's geographical location, Lu Qianjue would not have spoken to Lord Red at all. He knew where he stood and he did not dare to be disrespectful to Lu Qianjue. At this moment he saw Lu Yin and he was puzzled at first before being shocked. His confused gaze turned cold as he stared at Lu Yin. Lu Yin knew that Lord Red had recognized him and he clasped his hands behind his back. Chapter 12:16. Master Red's eyes narrowed as he glanced at Lu Qianjue. He was a little bewildered as he did not know what Lu Yin's relationship with the Sword Sect was. Wait, could the Sword Sect be behind him? Master Red immediately rejected this ridiculous idea. If Lu Yin had the Sword Sect behind him, then his path would be much smoother. Furthermore, the Sword Sect would not agree to the portal plan since he had been the one to come up with it. Another screen rose up, revealing a long-haired woman in white armor. Her face was hidden, but she had a heroic aura about her. Lu Yin knew who she was when he saw her attire. She was definitely from the Lingling clan. "Senior Lu, are you looking for me?" the woman asked, her gentle voice tinged with a hint of coldness. She was Ling Qiu, the leader of the Lingling clan. Lu Qianjue calmly replied, "Wait a moment." Ling Qiu frowned. If Master Red respected and revered Lu Qianjue, then she only respected and did not fear him. The Lingling clan was not the Blaze Realm. Lu Yin." Ling Qiu cried out in surprise. Lu Yin was not surprised that she had recognized him and he calmly replied, "This junior is indeed Lu Yin. You must be the leader of the Lingling clan." Ling Qiu was stunned. "Why are you in the Sword Sect?" She then looked at Lu Qianjue. "What's your relationship?" Lu Qianjue replied, "We'll talk about it when everyone is here." Ling Qiu was dissatisfied but she did not say anything else. She then looked at Master Red. Master Red smiled and nodded. Ling Qiu did not care about him. In her eyes, this Master Red was not even as valuable as Lu Yin. He looked like a burly man but he only knew how to play petty tricks. Master Red's gaze turned cold but he did not speak. The next person to appear was a skinny old man. When he appeared, Lu Qianjue's attitude became much more solemn. He was the master of Chaos God Mountain, Zhou. "What made you contact Chaos God Mountain Sect, Master Lu?" the old man asked curiously. "Has there been a change in the portal plan?" Lu Yin's heart skipped a beat and he listened intently. Lu Qianjue replied, "There's a junior who wants to meet you all. We'll talk about it when everyone is here." Zhou's gaze landed on Lu Yin. "You look familiar. Who are you, kid?" Lu Yin smiled. "Junior is Lu Yin." Zhou was shocked. "Lu Yin, one of the 10 arbiters who replaced Night King Jinwu. You're actually in the Sword Sect? That means that you already know about the portal plan? Let's wait until everyone's here. Isn't it tiring to talk about it one by one?" Zhou sneered. "My Chaos God Mountain's cultivation is never tiring. What matters is willpower." Lu Qianjue. Zhou looked at Lu Yin. "What are you doing in the Sword Sect, kid? Could it be that you convinced Sect Master Lu to help your Great Eastern Alliance? And what benefits did you give them?" Lu Yin replied, "Please wait a moment, senior." Zhou snorted. "This old man doesn't like waiting." Ling Qiu indifferently replied, "My status as an Outerverse Master is more than enough to make you wait." Zhou glanced at Ling Qiu in dissatisfaction. Girl, how can you speak to your senior like that? Zhou's. That. Louis's words. Was that Xiao? Master Lu Yin Qiange. Was. With J. Song Zhou laughed. Your Lingling clan doesn't have the ability to kill that old man. At that moment another screen appeared. This time it was not a person but rather a mountain. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. Lu Yin was stunned. A mountain? He could use a gadget. How lively. Everyone's here. The mountain spoke up. Lu Yin was stunned. Yes, the mountain had spoken. The mountain could speak as well. What the hell? Lu Qinju seemed to notice Lu Yin's confusion and he whispered, he's the tamed beast of the divine Great Hall's mountain god. He's the mountain god and the mountain god is him. There was such a thing? Lu Yin was confused. Senior Lu, why are you looking for me? The mountain spoke up. On the other side, Song Zhou was still arguing with Ling Qiu. Ling Qiu could not outtalk him so she could only say, old rascal. Song Zhou laughed proudly as if he had won. However, with his strength, Ling Qiu was definitely not his match and the gap between them was not even one generation. Lu Qinjue was not satisfied. Alright, stop arguing. We're just missing the Wen family. He then turned to the mountain. Wait a moment. We'll talk when everyone's here. The mountain looked very simple and did not say anything. Song Zhou was the most aggressive, but it was obvious that his seniority was the same as Lu Qinjue's. The others were all juniors. Soon after, another screen appeared, this one showing an old man holding a broom. Senior Lu, what are your orders? This old man was the current head of the Wen family when Zizai. Lu Yin realized that these leaders of the 8 great flow zones were not necessarily dignified. The more powerful they were, the less they seemed like experts. Lu Qinjue was fishing. Song Zhou was like a rascal. There was also this old man from the Wen family who was sweeping the floor. It seemed that Mistress Hong and Ling Qiu were more like experts. Of course, the mountain god was too dignified and did not seem human at all. Everyone's here. Lu Qinjue looked at Lu Yin. If you have something to say, say it. Song Zhou spoke up. Is everyone here? What about Dijiang? And the young emperor isn't here? Lu Qinjue replied, the Day-Night clan is close to the Ceiling clan so they're not participating in the Gateway project. The Gu Flow Zone has no connections with the outside world so they're not participating as well. When Ling Qiu, the mountain god, when Zizai and Mistress Hong heard about the Gateway project, they all looked at Lu Yin strangely before looking at Lu Qinjue. The Gateway project was designed to disintegrate the Great Eastern Alliance, and Lu Yin was the founder and alliance master of the Great Eastern Alliance. This was the same as saying that he was going to deal with Lu Yin right in front of him. What was the meaning of this? They were all stunned. I've already told him about the Gateway project. He asked me to gather everyone here because he has something to say, Lu Qinjue said. Lu Yin faced the group. It was this junior who asked Senior Lu to gather everyone. Song Zhou smiled. Kid, if you have something to say then say it. No matter what you say, the Gateway project will not change and the Great Eastern Alliance will definitely cease to exist. Huh. Ling Qiu's tone was cold. We won't touch Frostwave Weave, but the Great Eastern Alliance must cease to exist. When Zizai looked at Lu Yin in amazement. You're Lu Yin? I've heard a lot about you. The Day-Night clan is indebted to you for taking care of them. They've even beaten up the Ceiling clan. You're so powerful at such a young age. Mistress Hong snorted. The mountain gods stared at Lu Yin as well. Lu Yin was under a lot of pressure as these people represented more than half of the Innerverse. Even the Hall of Honor had to be careful when dealing with them. This had nothing to do with their strength but rather their influence. There were no powerhouses in the Innerverse with power levels over 1,000,000, and the Hall of Honor had more than one such powerhouse. However, this did not mean that they could do whatever they wanted. Otherwise, the Hall of Honor would have unified the entire universe a long time ago, and the Innerverse would have unified the Outerverse. Lu Yin took a deep breath. This chapter is not finished. Please turn the page. He raised his head and looked at the group. This junior knows about the Gateway project and the reason why I wanted to meet everyone is to divine the future. His words confused everyone. Divine the future? You've joined the Star Sibyl sect? Ling Qiu asked. Lu Yin smiled. The Star Sibyl sect is said to be able to divine the future, and when I say that the future is in my own hands, you can understand it in a different way. Let's have a battle of wits. What do you mean by that? Master Red asked in a low voice. Lu Yin looked at him. I created the Great Eastern Alliance and you all want to destroy it. That's why you came up with the Gateway Project. This junior is not a sitting duck, and this junior has seen his own future. If you seniors insist on carrying out the Gateway Project, then this junior can also see your futures. To be honest, that doesn't look too good. This is the battle of wits you mentioned? Threatening us with words? What a joke. You're just a junior. Who gave you the guts to threaten us? Master Red shouted angrily. Everyone else looked at Lu Yin. A normal person would have been scared silly, but Lu Yin had seen all sorts of situations. He had even dared to mock the presiding judge during his trial, let alone a mere threat from a screen. He looked at Master Red. The Blaze Realm borders the Outerverse. When the Innerverse and Outerverse were connected, the Blaze Realm sent eccentric Qi and the Astral River Arc to try and destroy the Great Eastern Alliance, but they ended up in a rather miserable state. Senior Master Red, do you think that you are comparable to the Day-Night clan, or do you think that the Blaze Realm surpasses the Day-Night clan? Impudence. Master Red was enraged and flames danced behind him as they swept into outer space, causing a planet in the distance to crack open. The planet that he was on to explode with lava that filled the sky. Lu Yin ignored him and instead looked at the others. Seniors, what do you think? Song Zhou laughed and so did the mountain god. Soon after, Wen Zizai and Lu Qinjue laughed as well. A battle of wits. Interesting. No junior has ever dared to challenge and threaten all of us at the same time. Times have really changed. The mountain god's voice was loud, but his tone was low. Sure, try threatening us, Wen Zizai said with a smile. Lu Qinjue calmly sat down and continued fishing. He didn't seem to care about Lu Yin at all. The plan is simple, but it's impossible for me to solve. Even though I have Leon's Armada as my backer and I can also borrow the strength of Master Yuan, Everlasting Island, the Lawn family and the Sea King's Dome, I still can't gather enough manpower to protect these 409 people. The assassins will definitely be experts from the Innerverse's great powers, and I won't be able to protect them. Once the plan is implemented, it will definitely succeed. Even if I can get Leon's Armada and Everlasting Island to help, I still can't deal with the entire Innerverse at the same time. Master Red sneered. When Zizai calmly looked at him. Nobody said anything. The universe had its own rules. The disciples of Everlasting Island had the power to directly threaten the Innerverse, but that didn't mean that they could actually threaten the Innerverse. These were the rules of the universe, and once the balance was broken, even the Hall of Honor wouldn't be able to withstand the repercussions. Lu Yin's eyes narrowed. I have to say that the person who came up with this plan is very smart. I also believe that even if we gather enough manpower to protect these 409 people, it will still be useless. These people won't be able to protect them forever. There's a saying that we can catch thieves for 1,000 days, but there's no such thing as guarding against thieves for 1,000 days. This plan can succeed at any time. But seniors have forgotten something. At this point, Lu Yin's eyes suddenly turned cold and filled with killing intent. This killing intent caused the surface of the nearby pond to boil and the air to freeze. End of chapter. Chapter 12:17. Even though Lu Yin was only a hunter, the killing intent that he exuded at this moment shocked even the leaders. To all of you, the people of the Outerverse are sheep, and to me they are sheep as well. How many people are there in the upper echelons of the Outerverse's great powers? 409 is only a small portion of the total, and the majority have already reached an agreement with all of you. Once the portal plan begins, they will immediately withdraw from the Great Eastern Alliance. But will they be able to withdraw? Lu Yin looked up and swept his bone-chilling gaze across the crowd. You can formulate a portal plan, but I can do the same. If an expert wants to kill a normal person, I can't protect them. But if I want to kill a normal person, none of you can protect them either. To all of you, they are normal people, and to me they are normal people as well. Song Zhou's eyes went wide and he stared at Lu Yin in shock. This brat was ruthless. Lu Qinjue's face sank. What a ruthless heart. He wanted to destroy everything indiscriminately. When Zizai looked at Lu Yin deeply. Everyone else had said that Lu Yin had unified the Innerverse and Outerverse by relying on timing and background, but at this moment, when Zizai was certain that this kid had the ability, boldness, and skill to unify the Outerverse. When Zizai was planning on reshuffling the cards. Those who joined the Great Eastern Alliance and the Innerverse would all die, and then he would choose a new batch of people. Junior, do you really think that you can intimidate us like this? Those people are all from the Outerverse. If you act, the Great Eastern Alliance will only disband faster, and they will view you as an enemy as well, Master Hong growled. Lu Yin raised his head. Of course, but I, Lu Yin, have never been afraid of anything. You can ask around and see how many voices of opposition the Great Eastern Alliance has faced since its establishment. Are those voices still around? Are their descendants still around? Since I dared to do something, I'm willing to bear the consequences. Is this the bargaining chip you're using to threaten us? Ling Qiu asked. Lu Yin met her gaze. Ling Qiu shook her head. It's useless. Even if this batch of higher-ups all die, the next batch will still be within the scope of the portal plan. We don't care, but how many people can you kill? If they have to choose between you and us, who do you think they'll choose? The more you kill, the more resistance you'll encounter. In the end, your frost wave weave might be dragged into this and no one will be able to save you. Song Zhou found it funny. This young man was full of spirit, but unfortunately he didn't think things through. Lu Yin's lips curled up. Senior Ling Qiu is right. If the cycle continues, I'll definitely be cursed by millions of people. Compared to the disbanding of the Great Eastern Alliance, this outcome is even harder to accept. Thus, since I'm unlucky, I won't let anyone else have a good time either. The reason why everyone wants to disintegrate the Great Eastern Alliance is to obtain benefits from the Outerverse. Regardless of whether it's plundering, trading, or cheating, the Innerverse abilities are enough to obtain huge benefits from the Outerverse. But what if something unexpected happens to these benefits? For example, you might be robbed by pirates, or the inside information of certain trades being made public, or the destruction of discovered resources. If that happens, will you still be able to live leisurely? Everyone's expressions changed. The pirates that Lu Yin was referring to were not ordinary pirates, nor were they just a single group of pirates. Instead, they were Leon's Armada, the Pirate King. A single sentence from him could gather more than half of the universe's pirates and topple the day-night flow zone. The pirates that Lu Yin was referring to were quite large in scale. Junior, are you threatening us? The mountain god's tone was unpleasant. Lu Yin smiled. I've said from the start that this will be a battle of words. When Zizai spoke up. In the end, the pirates weren't able to make a name for themselves. This chapter is not finished, so please turn the page. They weren't prepared enough and didn't expect things to go that far. If Alliance Master Lu thinks that just these pirates will be enough to make us feel apprehensive, then you're being too naive. Lu Yin nodded. I admit that. Actually, the pressure of being enemies with all of you seniors is great. No matter what methods I use, they're useless against all of you. There are only 6 of you, but you represent the entire Innerverse. The Innerverse influence is something that even a director of the Hall of Honor can't stop, let alone this junior. What I said earlier was just for the sake of the seniors' entertainment. If you don't take it to heart and still insist on starting the Gateway project, then this junior will be forced into a corner by you seniors. Then don't blame me for doing certain things such as... Lu Yin's eyes narrowed as he looked at Ling Qiu. Visiting each of your peers and challenging them. Ling Qiu's expression changed. When Zizai and Lu Qinjue's expressions changed as well. I've always wanted to experience the Lingling clan's innate gift, the Wen family's literary prison, and the Sword Sect's 13 swords. Of course, I'm also curious about Chaos God Mountain's close combat abilities, as well as the Beast Tamer's flow zone's various tamed beasts. All of these fascinate me, and I've decided to challenge each of you one by one before the Supreme Astral Tournament. I'll do my best to prevent your most outstanding descendants from entering the tournament. Lu Yin's voice was loud and filled with confidence. His words silenced everyone and their expressions changed. If the Supreme Astral Tournament was just a normal tournament, they wouldn't have cared about it. However, at their level, they were aware of certain things and they viewed the tournament with incomparable importance. Even if they didn't know about the rewards for the top 10, they had still heard that it was a chance to change one's fate. If not for coincidental opportunities, these spots would not have been opened up for everyone to compete for. This was not only a chance to change the fate of the participants, but also the fate of the entire organization. The Day-Night clan had always wanted to enter the Neoverse. Thus, when Night King Zhenwu had been selected as one of the 5 astral children, the entire clan had celebrated. Night King Zhenwu had been directly selected as the next clan leader, and the Day-Night clan had followed suit. The Sword Sect also wanted to enter the Neoverse, as did the Lingling clan and Chaos God Mountain. Who didn't? Who didn't want to change their fate? The Supreme Astral Tournament was a chance to change one's fate. When news of the Supreme Astral Tournament had spread and they had learned of some of the inside stories, they had prepared to gather all of their resources to nurture their most outstanding disciples and fight for one of the top 10 spots. However, at this moment Lu Yin stood in their way. Others might not be able to use this to threaten them, but Lu Yin could. His battle record was too glorious and he was too strong. If he really did challenge them, then even if their descendants were on par with Lu Yin, they wouldn't be able to participate in the Supreme Astral Tournament. They couldn't afford such a price. This wasn't a matter of benefits but rather a matter of fate. You don't want to participate in the Supreme Astral Tournament anymore? Ling Qiu barked. Lu Yin smiled. It doesn't matter. I'm already very satisfied with cultivating from an ordinary person to where I am today, and I value the Great Eastern Alliance even more. Since you all want to destroy my Great Eastern Alliance, then I'll destroy what you all value. Lingling's Sky Palace has amazed this junior and it's time for me to challenge it. Is the Great Eastern Alliance really that important to you? Its existence doesn't affect you that much. In the eyes of the Neoverse, you can be replaced at any time, Wen Zizai said. Lu Yin replied, it's very important and none of you would believe me even if I told you. This chapter is not finished, so please turn the page. By the way, I'll add one more thing. This junior has been nominated by Everlasting Sky Island's Elysian Celestial Master to be the Pass Lord of Mount Supreme. If any of you seniors don't know what a Pass Lord is, you can ask around. It's very useful information. You've been nominated as the Pass Lord? Song Zhou cried out. Lu Qinjue also turned to look at Lu Yin with a shocked expression. Lu Yin smiled. Seems that all of you seniors already know. Then you should understand the consequences of this junior's challenge. Everyone looked at each other. As the masters of the Innerverse 8 Great Flow Zones, they had received quite a bit of inside information after the news of the Supreme Tournament had spread. Naturally, this information included the Pass Lord. The so-called Pass Lord meant that one man could hold his own against 10,000 men. Only the strongest person could become the Pass Lord, and there was a limit to the number of participants. In other words, whoever became the Pass Lord would be considered the strongest person and could be considered a seeded participant. Ling Qiu was very confident in Ling Gong, as the 10 arbiters were unrivaled among their peers. Even so, she had never thought that Ling Gong would be nominated as the Pass Lord, as it was too difficult. They had only chosen one Pass Lord, and that was the Xianxia Celestial Master, an unrivaled user of the Three Suns ancestral qi. Only this person had the qualifications to become the Pass Lord. They had never expected that Lu Yin would be nominated, and by the Elysian Celestial Master at that. The Elysian Celestial Master was an existence that truly stood at the pinnacle of humanity, and his judgment could not be wrong. Could this person already be on par with the Xianxia Celestial Master? Any threat would be useless against them. Only this threat which concerned their fate would be effective. Regardless of whether or not they believed that their juniors could compete for one of the 10 spots, none of them dared to take the risk. Lu Yin was the type of person who would do what he said. Using battle to nurture battle. Junior's cultivation is to grow through battle, and the more I fight, the more I improve. I'm looking forward to fighting against the other 10 arbiters, Lu Yin said with a sigh. Junior, don't think that you can do whatever you want just because you defeated 2 of the 10 arbiters. Ling Gong, Wen Sanxi and Lu Tianmu have all broken through to the Enlighter realm, and they're not people that you can deal with. Any one of them can easily deal with you. Don't even think that we'll cancel our plan. Lu Yin looked at him with contempt and disdain. There's no one in the Blaze realm that's worthy of my challenge. Challenging you guys will only increase your reputation, and it's embarrassing. Arrogant. Master Red was furious and he glared at Lu Yin as if he wanted to eat him alive. Lu Qinju asked, are you confident that you can deal with the 13 swords? Lu Yin casually replied, it doesn't matter. I'm confident that I won't die under the 13th sword. As long as I don't die, I'll be able to drag out the battle. Lu Qinju fell silent. Song Zhou sneered. Then make your move. You're one of the 10 arbiters, so you can only challenge them. Lu Yin looked at him. Even if the 10 arbiters participate, your juniors will still have to face those from the Neoverse. Don't forget that the 5 Scions of the Stars are from the Neoverse. and the 10 arbiters might be able to help you if they join. Wen Zizai sighed. I'm actually being threatened by a junior. Sweeping is still more comfortable. The mountain god looked at Lu Yin and so did everyone else. They all felt that this was a thorny problem. Even if a junior was truly invincible within his own generation and dared to threaten them, they would not care, let alone the 10 arbiters. They were confident that they could heavily injure him before he even got close. However, Lu Yin was different. His background was too terrifying and he could easily find an expert to protect him. End of chapter.